สวัสดีตอนบ่ายทุกท่านนะครับโอเคครับผม
Good afternoon, everyone.
เดี๋ยวรอทางทีมงานสักครู่นะครับสวัสดีตอนบ่ายทุกท่านนะครับ
Good afternoon,
เกียร
everyone.
ติทุกท่านนะครับแล้วก็
Welcome all
สวัสดี
distinguished
ท่าน
guests.
ผู้ติดตามรับชมนะครับทาง
And
เพจ Facebook ในภาษาไทยทาง
welcome everyone from the
นะครับแล้วก็
Facebook
ภาษาอัง
Thailand
กฤษทางเพจของ
and then
Fair
the
Finance Thailand
English channel from Fair
วัน
Finance
นี้ครับยินดี
Thailand.
ต้อนรับแขกทุกท่านแล้วก็ผู้รับชมทุกท่านนะครับเข้า
So
สู่
I would like to welcome
Climate
everyone
Finance
to
and
the
Thailand Taxonomy
Climate Finance and Thailand Taxonomy Opportunity and
การ
Challenge.
จัดกลุ่มกิจกรรมสีเขียวของไทยโอกาสและความท้าทายนะครับผมในกิจกรรมวันนี้ครับ
So in today's event,
โครงการเคสนะครับโดย
it's under the CASE project supported by
ด้านสภาพภูมิอากาศนะครับสหพันธ์สาธารณรัฐเยอรมัน
from GIST
ก่อนความร่วมมือระหว่างประเทศเยอรมันนะครับเป็นหรือ GIZ เป็น
And
ผู้
then
ดำเนินการหลักภายในประเทศไทยครับผม
we have supported from BMWK, we have support from GIC, ERI, TDRI,
โดยทั้งนี้ครับในงานนี้ยังมีพันธมิตร
and on this event we have other partners who help us organizing the event today and also the content. For example, like Fair Finance Thailand and the Greenpeace Thailand.
โดยทั้งนี้ครับในลำดับแรกครับผมอยากกลับขอเรียนเชิญ
First, I like to invite คุณจารุการ ราชสิริ the
ทรัพยากรธรรมชาติพลังงานและการ
Director
ขนส่ง GIZ ประเทศไทยนะครับกล่าว
of
ต้อนรับทุกท่าน
Cluster Coordinator Natural Resources, Energy and Mobility Cluster from GIC Thailand. So hello everyone, my name is Jarukan from GIC Thailand. I am very pleased to be welcoming you all today and invite you all to the event today. So as for GIC, it's a key leader in trying to put forward clean energy in Southeast Asia. We have collaborate with many organizations, for example, such as TDRI, who are also the host for today. As for the project, we have collaborations for many organizations in the Southeast Asia, and we are committed to make every sectors, whether private sector, public sector, and civil society, to join force and understand energy transition to renewable energies by thinking about evidence-based and the knowledge that could help us understand the process. So today is very important to hear from different sectors and to understand the mechanisms to drive such a process. And of course, today focus will be on finance. As everyone will aware, 27 years from now would be a very crucial time for Thailand and for the world as well to drive this important transition of energy and climate. And this will, of course, show us how could we reach the carbon neutrality by 2050. And also the goals that we set about greenhouse gas emissions that we want to dump it down to zeros by 2065. And this is the commitment that Thailand has given during COP26. And of course, in doing this transition, we need a lot of mechanisms where there would be government policies or support from the private sectors and also support from civil society. So in the next 3 decades would not be possible had we not have important transitions in transportation, in industries, and in other sectors. Of course, it requires all these collaboration, especially in terms of finance, in helping to support these transitions and to overcome the challenges that will take place. So what we put on the table today, whether there are researchers' findings that we have support about climate finance that Creagy is going to present, will definitely be important documents and research mechanisms that allow us to debate and will lead us to policy decision and for us to come up with framework. We also have tools to what we call green taxonomies or Thailand taxonomies. I'm pretty excited about this tool, to learn about this tool along with everyone, for me and for us to understand the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead. So GIZ believe that what's important is that we would have these discussions and we listen to different stakeholders. And we hope that for the project in the future, we will get to hear more from different factors. And GIZ has worked closely with ONEP and we look at ourselves as mediator between the public, private, and civil societies to make decisions together of what it should be in the future and what could help us to make decisions in the future and to drive these goals forward. So thank you everyone for coming here and for exchanging information with us. And for me personally, I'm going to stay throughout the event to hear from all the speakers who are experts on this. So thank you everyone for giving your time here. Thank you ERI for hosting this with us, the TDRI who joined us today, and speakers from many organizations, whether Bank of Thailand, the Federation of Thai Industry, and Fair Finance Thailand, who represents civil society. Please enjoy and discuss and learn together. And I hope that we would come up with more understanding and insight to make better decisions on what investments or what projects or what changes we want to drive forward. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Kun Jarukan Rassiri, for welcoming us all to this presentation of summary of climate finance for carbon neutrality in Thailand. So this event is divided into two sections. The first one is the presentation on the summary of climate finance, and then the second session would be a public discussion panel on the opportunity and challenge of climate finance and Thailand Taxonomy. And for each section is 1 hour each. So the documents for today's event, everyone can download from this QR code, as you see on the screen. If any of you would like to see more details or to see more information, you can download the handouts. We have a live on Facebook page for Thai at TDRI Facebook page and for English at Fair Finance Facebook page. Next, I'd like to invite Kun Boonrod Yaowapruek, who is a managing partner from Creagy, and Kun Kannikar Srithunyalucksana, who is a director from Creagy, to present the findings about the study on climate finance for carbon neutrality in Thailand. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kannikar Srithunyalucksana. I represent Creagy, who's going to present on this first session. As GAC has said, this project has worked on climate finance for carbon neutrality in Thailand, and this is the final report, and it's the day that we're going to present about the result findings. So the case when we get the questions about carbon neutrality of Thailand in 2050, case has a technical teams consists of TDI, ERI, and partners from abroad in Germany to do the projection of the case studies of energy cases in Thailand, of the directions in which we should move forward to achieve the goals. So after we get the projections, the case asks Creagy to help look at the policies and the financial mechanisms. So this outcome of the studies has divided into two parts. The first one will look at the financial mechanisms of all around the world, and then another sections will look at if we have to apply this to energy, our own energy sector, how we should apply it. So today we trying to show about financial mechanisms and the climate finance that could help on energy sector of Thailand. So today we're going to address, so if we look at the global landscape first, and then we're going to look at Thailand's goal and how much investment Thailand would need to achieve the climate finance that we need. And then we're going to scope down into our own energy sector of how much money the sector needs and what kind of tools we have that could lead us to carbon neutrality. So we're going to start out with global landscape. We are familiar, right, that global population has agreed that if we don't want to face the disasters of the climate change, then we have to try net zero emissions by 2050, and we try to keep the temperature down at 1.5 degrees Celsius. However, this is unachievable without money. So climate finance is very important, and it helps, is actually a main driver to this goal. So today we are at about 600 billion. However, if we want to achieve this goal by 2050, we need 6 trillion to meet this goal of net zero. So we take a look at the landscape. Right now we have 653 billion. And this comes from public and private finances. It comes in form of grants. It's coming in form of no cost and project-based market. So we have different types of funds. And you see that a lot of money has been put in on mitigation, and energy sector is the leading role in this landscape. So this is what it looks like last year. In 2030, we need another 2,800 billion to that by 2050 we achieve net zero. So you see that half of it is power and transport. And then besides that, industry, building, green hydrogen, loss and damage adaptation. So these are global landscape. This is the investment needed for climate action per year by 2030. And there's power system, transport system, industry, buildings, green hydrogen. These are projection and our literature reviews for these studies. So now it comes to Thailand. And we are familiar with the 2030 goals that we want to reduce about 30% goal. And then we could aim to reduce 40% more of greenhouse gases with international support. And then by 2050, we want carbon neutrality. And by 2065, we want to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emission. So this is the breakdown, the share that each has to help reduce, and you see that the energy sector is the most important. And then another sector that will become very important is the one who remove these greenhouse gases out of the systems. So in order to meet 30% in 2030, which is our short-term goal, we estimate that if it's unconditional and we have to reduce by 30%, we have to reduce about 290 metric tons carbon dioxide equivalent, and you will see that it goes to energy and transport. So this is the estimation. But if we do the condition one, which is 40%, we have to reduce 342 million metric tons carbon dioxide equivalent. And the investment has to be increased to 8,000 billion. And you will see that the transport section get expanded. And when we scope it down for the energy sector, this is a study from CASE. If we look at on the technical side, so before neutrality, we divide them into 3 phases. The first one is from now to 2030. And we aim to reduce about 30% from power sector. And what kind of technologies are needed? If you look at it, we want solar, we want wind, and then there has to be no new coal plants. And for transport, we have to have modal shift to use more public transportation, this encouragement of using biofuels, and the increase of EV. As for industry, we will have to continue using biomass and then replacing oil with electric heat pumps. And that's our first phase. We project that we are able to reduce about 74 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. And from the second phase, 2030-2037, power sector still plays a crucial role. We would have solar and battery energy storage. Again, no new coal plants. And for transport, we would increase EV, and then we're trying to improve the fuel economy. And for industry, we're trying to do electrification, and we're trying to allocate biomass across sub-industry sector. And then the final phase, reaching toward 2050, we're trying to reduce 78% of greenhouse gas reduction from 2019. We would still have renewable, and we would include hydrogen in our systems. And then for transport, we focus on EV, and we're going to try to do rail freight transport. And for industry, it's the same trend. Then we should not have coal anymore. We should have complete coal phase out, and we should increase the use of hydrogen. And by this, we expect to reduce 65 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. So from this framework, if we have to come up with financial tools to help promote this transition, so what kind of financial instruments that we should have? Before we might think that, okay, we think of it based on technologies, but for Creagy and for our team, we think that it does not depend on technologies, but it depends on like the progress of that technologies. So let's say if we have, it's at like the, during the very early phase of that technologies, when we don't have a lot of knowledge about that technologies, that means that we have to have a lot of government support and financial support. But if then if the progress goes on, that we're starting to know what it is, we begin to test it, the financial tools would be different. That is why like the financial tools for each phase is different. You will see that during R&D, this would be like R&D supports the grant. But if you move to like the phase of demonstration, you would see that this is investment subsidy. That means the share of the subsidy would decrease. And then during deployment, it would be on soft loan and trying to make the project reduces risk. And then at the end, we have diffusions and commercial. Then we can use like market tools, and we could allow private finance to take leading roles. So these are the concepts that we use to design our financial instruments. So what the government should do? So in each stage, we think the tax incentive the government could work on from the beginning to the end, both towards big companies and both towards small companies. But for the pre-feasibility studies and R&D and demonstration, we think about grant, and then during deployment, we think about soft loan and the risk guarantee. Diffusion is the same, and then commercial stage, we think about carbon pricings and climate bond. So when we select financial tools, there's 5 categories, right? From the first phase, that the private sectors could play a crucial role. So we look at each tools, how it could leverage the investments of the private sectors. For example, if it's like grant or subsidy investments, if the government invested one part, the private sector would invest for about 3 times. So co-funding ratio, then it's 1 against 3. With soft loan and risk guarantees for every baht that the government put in, there would be another 25 baht that come from private investment. And then from tax incentive, the co-financing ratio is 1 to 10. And then climate bond, this is probably could be our assumptions, but every time when we issue bonds for climate bonds, the expense is actually more expensive. But if the government closes the gap here to make it less complicated, it could help this climate bond to take flight. So we imagine that if the government put about 2 million baht grants for the climate bond issuers for issuance of at least 500 million baht climate bond that could come from private sectors. And then we have market-based mechanisms. So if government can provide a floor price equivalent to about like 100 baht per tons carbon dioxide, and these could be very effective because the co-financing ratio is 1 to 350. So, and these could be matched with the technologies of each sector. We begin by power sector. So you see that case has a projection, right, for each phase, what kind of technologies are needed. What we see here is a solar, wind, battery, and hydrogen. So for each phase, it can reduce certain percentage of the greenhouse gases. Once we know the technologies, we could map that during like the short and the middle period, and then the long term. Where would these technologies be at what stage? So for example, if we look at hydrogen, we think that during 2030, it should be in R&D, but for 2030 to 2037, it would move to demonstration. And then after that, towards 2050, it would goes into deployment. But battery, it's like during deployment, and then towards 2050, it could be deployment and diffusions, and we hope that by the end of 2050, it would be commercial. So we match this technology, and then we can match with the financial tools. So when we project that the amount of investment needed for each technology, then we would know the size of investments of each phase. For example, if you looked at now until 2030, we have to invest about 2.3 trillion baht. And when we match the technology, you will see that the government has to put in about 65,000 million baht. So the average co-financing ratio would be 1 to 35. And you see the support for greenhouse gas emission reductions would be 227 baht per tons carbon dioxide. And if you look at 2030 to 2037, we calculate the number in the same ways. We would need an investment about 1.3 trillion baht, and the government by this phase would not focus on the new technologies as much, and the government can only invest about 9,000 billion, and an average co-financing ratio would be 1 to 144, and the cost is 28 baht per ton per carbon dioxide. And then if we move to the final phase, we need an investment of about 4.5 trillion baht, and then the government has to put in on nearly 30,000 million baht. So with here, you see that we could reduce by about 291 million metric ton carbon dioxide equivalent. And then during the second phase, we can reduce by 343 million metric tons carbon dioxide equivalent. And then the final phase, we expect to reduce by 784 million tons metric tons carbon dioxide equivalent. So this COPS concept has been applied with the transport sector as well. And then we map the technology for each stage, and then we map the financial tools. And then we have the investment number and the number that the government has to invest. So from now to 2030, the greenhouse gas emission has not reduced. It's a little bit added. It's about 24 million metric tons carbon dioxide equivalent. However, in the second and the third phase will be reduced. At the second phase is 111 million, and the third phase 635 million. And we need investments about 1.4 billion at the first phase, 3.4 billion at the second phase, and then 5.1 billion in the third phase. So if you see here at 2050, you would see that the amount of greenhouse gas reduction by then is quite tremendous. It's 635 million metric tons carbon dioxide equivalent. And the same goes for industry sector. In the first phase, we focus on the biomass and then replacing oil with electric heat pump. And then at the final phase, we try to increase the roles of hydrogen in the industry. And then the reduction goal of each phase. So from now to 2030 is reduced by 236 million, and 2030 to 2037 is minus 291 million, and then the final phase is minus 761 million. And then we have estimation of investment here. And this is the overall landscape of 3 sectors. So we have the first phase, we expect to reduce 503 million metric tons, and total investments would be 5,400 billion baht. The 43% is energy, and then 28% in red belongs to transport, and then 30 for industrial. And then public finance, we need about 200 billion. And the average co-financing ratio is 1:24, and support per carbon dioxide reduce is 422 baht. And then in the middle phase, we intend to reduce 745 million metric tons, and total investments would be 8,200 billion, public finance 300 billion, and average co-financing ratio 1:26, and support per carbon dioxide reduce is at about 410 baht per carbon dioxide ton. And then from the final phase, we expect to reduce 2,181 million metric tons, and total investment would be 15,000 billion, and then public finance would be 120 billion. Average co-financing ratio, it's at 1:128, and support per carbon dioxide reduce is 54 baht. So you will see that you may feel that the number is quite large, but this is only investment. But of course, when we invest money in, there will be some money return in the cycle. And of course, this is flexible. If the government intends to do this, the government has to match between the phase of technologies and the financial tools. You will see that overall, the climate finance that's going to push forward for carbon neutrality doesn't really the large part of it does not really come from the government, but the government has to initiate. And what could lead climate finance towards this goal of carbon neutrality would be Thailand Taxonomy. That's why it leads to why we're going to discuss on the next section what's the role of Thailand Taxonomies and why is it important to help the ecosystems of this. And that is our background for today. There is a summary and recommendation. So if we're really moving toward net zero, we have to increase the scale of climate finance. And then we have to have structural changes for economic and social development. And we have to prioritize data and coordination on climate action. And all these actions has to be taken seriously. And we have to keep moving forward this to stimulate the ecosystems toward carbon neutrality economy. And that's it from Creagy. Thank you very much. So if you have any questions from Facebook are here on the floor, I'm willing to answer. If there's no questions, thank you everyone. I understand the host will take the stage.
ขอบคุณมากครับ
Thank you very much. So this is the first section that we present the final report of climate finance for carbon neutrality in Thailand, including the tools that help with transition. Next, we're going to have a 15-minute break, and everyone can enjoy the break outside. After that, if you still have questions about the presentation on the final report, you can ask later, and you can bring this into discussions, because at the end we're going to have some public hearing and we're going to have some Q&A, whether it's on climate finance or on Thailand taxonomy. So right now we're going for a 15 minutes break, and let me say hi to the audience at Facebook, and welcome back. We'll see you in 15 minutes.
ครับ
All right.
สวัสดีทุกท่าน
Welcome back,
ขอยิน
everyone,
ดีต้อนรับกลับมาอีกรอบหนึ่งของ
to
เรา
the
นะครับ
second
ก็
part of
จริงๆ
the
เซกชันนี้
event.
เป็นเซกชันที่แบบ
This
เป็นกันเอง
section
นะครับ
is
แล้วก็
pretty
จะมีการ
informal,
พูดคุยกัน
and
แล้ว
we're
ก็
going to
จะเปิดโอกา
have
สให้
a
ทุกท่าน
discussion,
ได้
and
มี
we
คำถาม
also
แล้วก็
gonna
ข้อเสนอ
open
แนะต่าง
the
ๆ
floor
ต้องบอก
for
ว่า
Q&A.
เราเพิ่งได้ฟังกันมา
If you have any
ในช่วงก่อนหน้า
question
นี้
and
นะครับ
suggestions, you can
ตัว
ask
เลข
us.
แล้วก็เห็นภาพ
Because we
อย่าง
just
ตัวเลขไปหม
listened
ด
about
วันนี้
the
เราจะมา
landscape
แชร์
about
รายละเอียด
climate
กันแล้วก็มาดูว่า
finance, right?
พวกเรา
This
ทุกคนที่
session
อยู่ใน
is
ที่นี้
going
นะครับ
into
วิท
a
ยากร
little
ที่มี
bit
ความ
of
รู้แต่ละท่านเนี่ย
details.
จะมาแชร์
All
มุมมอง
experts
ในเรื่อง
here
โอ
could
กาส
share
แล้วก็ท้า
their
ทายเนี่ยจะทำให้ climate finance ของ
about
เราเนี่ยบรรลุ
opportunity
เป้า
and
ให้ประเทศไทย
challenges
เราเป็น
of how to
carbon
achieve
neutral
our climate
ก็
finance
ก่อนอื่น
goal
ผมขออนุญาต
to
แนะนำ
carbon
ตัวเองนะครับ
neutrality.
ก็บุญรอดเยาวพฤกษ์
My
เป็น
name is
managing
Boonrod
partner
Yaowapruek.
บริษัท
I'm the
Creagy
managing
นะครับ
partner from
ด้าน climate
Creagy, and
change
I'm the consultant
แล้ว
on
ก็
climate
วิทยากร
change.
ของเรา
And
วันนี้นะครับ
our
มีทั้งทาง
esteemed
ที่นี่
speakers
นะครับเพจ
today
แล้ว
who
ก็
are
จะมีทางออน
present
ไลน์
here, and then we
นะครับ
have
เข้า
one
มา
more
จากทาง
speakers
Greenpeace นะครับก็เดี๋ยวจะ
online
ให้
calling
แต่
from
ละท่านเนี่ย
Greenpeace.
แนะนำตัวเอง
So I'm
เป็น
gonna
ทาง
let
การ
them
นะครับ
introduce
ขออนุญาต
themselves.
ไล่จาก
I
ที่เป็น
will
จากผมก่อน
begin
นะครับก็
with a
ขออ
person
นุญาต
next
แนะนำ
to
นะครับ
me,
คุณนาที
and this is
สิทธิประสานนะครับ
Kun
ผู้แท
Natee
นจากกลุ่มอุตสาหกรร
Sithiprasasana,
มพลังงาน
Vice Chairman
แห่ง
Biomass
ประเทศไทย
Energy
นะครับ
of
ขออนุญาตให้
Renewable
คุณนาที
Energy
ขอ
Industry
ตบมือด้วย
Club.
นะครับเดี๋ยวจะแนะนำหนึ่งรอบก่อนแล้วจะให้แต่ละท่านแนะนำตัวเองสั้นๆนะครับแล้วก็ท่านที่สองนะครับอันนี้
And next
คุณหน้าคุณตา
is
เป็นอย่างดี
everyone
ถ้าใครเป็น
very
นักอ่านตัวยง
familiar.
หรือว่าผู้ติด
Anyone
ตาม
who is
ก็
a reader
จะ
or
คุ้นหน้านะครับก็
read
แนะ
her
นำคุณ
column.
สารินี
Please welcome คุณ Sarinee
หัวหน้าคณะวิจัย
Achavanuntakul,
แนว
Research
Fair
Lead
Finance
from
Thailand
Fair Finance
ท่าน
Thailand.
สุดท้ายนะครับขาดไม่
And
ได้นะครับงาน
last
ในวัน
but
นี้
not
เนื่องจากเรา
least,
พูดถึง
very
เรื่อง
important
Thailand
person
Finance
here because we talk
Taxonomy
about
นะครับ
climate
ก็
finance
ผู้แทน
and
ธนาคารแห่งประเทศ
taxonomies.
ไทย
A
นะครับขอ
representative
ยก
from
มือ
Bank
นะครับ
of
คุณ
Thailand.
ธนิดา
Please give a round of applause for คุณ Thanida, Lawseriwanich, Senior Analyst from Bank of Thailand.
แล้วก็อีกท่านหนึ่งนะครับที่ออน
And
ไลน์เข้ามา
another
นะครับ
speaker
อยากจะตัดภาพ
joining us
นะครับ
online.
สักครู่นะครับไม่แน่ใจว่าออนไลน์
So
เข้า
not
มา
sure if you can show him
นะครับ
online
ขอ
from
อนุญาตให้
Greenpeace.
ทาง Greenpeace แนะนำตัวนะครับ
So please introduce yourself.
We are introducing the section and you can introduce yourself about what your background first and then we can have another round to introduce people on the panel. Okay, you are muted ครับ maybe you เขาไม่เห็นโอเคได้นะครับก็ผมแปลเหมือนภาษาที่ไม่ได้ยินนะครับขอสวัสดีนะครับทุกคนแล้วก็ยินดีมากๆที่มา
Although I
ฟัง
didn't
กัน
hear
นะครับ
what he
เดี๋ยวเรา
said, but he said
เด็ก
that
นะครับ
hello everyone.
โอเค
He's
ครับ
glad to join the
แล้วก็
session.
เพื่อไม่ให้เป็น
He's
การ
going
เสี
to
ยเวลา
fix
ผม
some
อยาก
technical
ให้แต่ละท่านเนี่ย
issues,
แนะนำตัว
and
เอง
we'll
ดี
hear
กว่า
from
เพราะ
him
ว่า
later.
ทุกท่าน
So
มากมายแล้วก็
every
เรามี
speakers
วิทยา
here
กรที่มาจากหลากหลาย
can
ภาคส่วน
introduce
นะครับ
themselves,
ก็
and because they
ทั้ง
come from
สภา
different
พุทธเองนะ
sectors,
ครับทาง Fair
from
Finance เอง
the
แล้วก็ทางธนาคารแห่งประเทศไทยเนี่ย
Federation
ก็
of
อาจจะ
Thai
มี
Industry,
ของ
from
ในเรื่อง
Fair
ของ
Finance,
นะครับ
from
ขออนุญาต
Bank
ให้
of
คุณนาที
Thailand.
แนะนำตัว
They all
แล้ว
would
ก็
have different
พูดถึง
aspect and
ก็
different
สิ่ง
perspective of
ที่
these
ทราบ
issues. So Kunati, if you could introduce yourself
ขอบคุณครับ
first.
สวัสดีทุกท่านครับ
Hello
บางท่าน
everyone.
ก็คุ้นหน้าคุ้นตากันดีนะค
A
รับ
lot of you might be
คุณ
familiar
บุญรอด
with
บอกว่ามี
me.
เวลาก็
Kun Boonrod
อธิ
said
บาย
that
อธิบาย
I
ตัวเองหน่อย ย้อนไป
we had a
20
little
ปี
time and need to explain about myself. I could go back 20 years
20
ago.
ที่แล้วเนี่ย
20 years ago, I was involved with a coal plant project. Anyone know Bangrut? It's a very pretty ocean. I was working on that project, but that project eventually didn't work out, and then we have the natural gas plant instead. So with the funds of the coal plant, so then I moved to renewable energy, and I looked at the Grab plant at Pitit, อำเภอบางนาค. It's 80 biopower plant. The highlight is there. It was the first project that get CDM from UNFCCC. Director Prasasuk is here. He was the director of approval for that project. It was the first project of Thailand for the IOA biomass. What is CDM? CDM is carbon credit. That is international standard. The only one. Vera gold standard. It's not international standard because it's issued by America, it's issued by Switzerland, but CDM is the only standard that is issued by UN. And from that Grab plant, we look for new materials. We go down to the south to Surathani, and we use something from palms. now, when you go to palms plant, normally the smell would be really bad, but then we use what is left over from palms and we use it to turn it into the biomass plants. And then we use it in the incinerator. It was very damp. It was very hard to make. But after that, when we trying to come up with issues and we do the biomass plant, but then a couple years later, other palm factories, come and look at this, and then they trying to make the power plant that based on these palm byproducts. That was on business, right? But right now, I'm in the Federation of Thai Industries. I'm active on the industries of biomass and renewable energy. And then for climate change, the federations of Thai industry thinks that climate change is very important and needs to be handled. And all members of the Federation of Thai Industry are all impacted, whether they are the big enterprise or SMEs, they are all impacted, and we are concerned about this. That's why we have this to handle these issues, and I'm the committee and I'm the secretary of this climate change task force under the FRTI. So yes, I'm here to share the knowledge and to learn from you all. So thank you very much. So please give a big round of applause to Natee. So he actually went back 20 years ago. I've heard the word carbon finance, and carbon finance is very important, and is part of the climate finance is to do financings from using carbon credit. And so after a time, what I've learned from him that the climate finance has to be fair, and it has to be able to be accessed by the large and small and medium enterprise. So now we can moving on to Sarinee, who lead Fair Finance. So hello everyone, and I'm very happy. I'm not sure if you go by ages because I'm in the middle here. So my experience did not go back 20 years. I worked for bank for about 10 years, and then I established South Forest, which is a research institute. And about 6 years ago, we cooperate with many civil societies, 4 of them from River, South River, El Law, International Rivers, and the Foundations for Consumer. So these are 4 organizations that we work with. Another one is Earth. And all these become Fair Finance Thailand. So this is the 6th year of Fair Finance Thailand. And in each year we use different methodologies to give scores for banks. So there are about 10 countries that are members of Fair Finance, and the latest we just have Fair Finance Vietnam and Fair Finance Cambodia. Everyone is trying to use the score metrics to evaluate the policies on sustainability of the banks that the banks are exposed to public. And of course, climate change is very important. It's in there, and nature and human rights issues are all in our score metric. And this is why we are interested in this, even though we are not expert on the climate finance, but we trying to encourage banks to move towards this climate finance. And in recent years, South Forest has a research that focuses especially on the climate transitions. And when we do reviews, and we think this is very important, we cannot just talk about transition and not just transitions. We cannot go without the fairness or the justice. So it's very important. Thank you. Please give another big round of applause for Kun Yui. And then the last one here, and then we go to the online. So a representative from Bank of Thailand. It's important to have the taxonomy, right? And the BOT just recently launched this Thailand taxonomy. So my name is Thanida. I'm the senior analyst of Bank of Thailand. So if you talk about sustainability, it's just not Bank of Thailand that works on this. So the entire financial sectors actually work together, the entire monetary authority, not just Bank of Thailand, even the SEC, the SET, and the insurance federations. So we have the 5 monetary authorities working together and issue sustainable finance initiative because we are the backup, right? And we are the funder. And we know this is very important and it requires a lot of investments. So we try to make guidelines so that everyone in the financial sectors can work together. So what Kun Boonrod just mentioned is what we call Thailand Taxonomy. So taxonomy it's a dictionary, green dictionary for everyone to understand the definitions of the green, because there are many ways to be greens, right? People could claim that this are green and that are green, but greens are not equal. Each person's green are not equal. So we have these Thailand taxonomies that could be a policies or could be a reference where everyone could refer back what it is to actually be green. And this is also taxonomy is also includes about timing. So we don't want to go too quickly that we leave someone behind. That's why we involve 5 authorities together. So please give a round of applause. So this is just introduction, and everyone already touched on opportunity and challenges. And I think before we dive into the discussion, may I invite Mr. Kuba from Greenpeace, who already prepared the presentation. I think we could hear from Greenpeace first to understand what are some of the campaigns from the European continent and how could we apply their experiences to us in Thailand. So please, Mr. Kuba Gogolewski, please introduce yourself and present what you prepare. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I hope now you can hear me.
Yes.
Good. So my name is Kuba Gogolewski. I'm working with Greenpeace Money for Change. It's a European campaign representing different European organizations. I'm speaking on behalf and my colleague from the European Union was not able to attend. Koloff mentions I have started my work with energy, climate and finance back in 2011, working on the Polish coal sector and the nexus with climate. And one of my first job was engaging with the European Investment Bank on its first energy policy revision, when there was the introduction of what was called emission performance standards. So technical criteria who de facto rolled out investment for new coal power plants in Europe. And that showed that what financial institutions do really translate to the possibilities of accessing finance. This was not about sustainable finance, it was more about brown finance. I will share now my screen I can share my screen. Hopefully will fix the issues. I have been given a task to present the lessons learned from the EU taxonomy process, and also from yes, but this is not the page. 1 second. From the process and from the European. Here we go. That's always fun online here. And I hope you can also see the slide deck now, or you should be saying. So to present lessons from the taxonomy. Okay. The EU taxonomy process started quite some time ago. The idea was to exactly guide the sustainable finance and to define clearly based on scientific criteria what could be considered sustainable, meaning green, and what not. It did not have an intention to say what you cannot invest. Things not green can still be invested in. And the problematic part that I wanted to delve in started with the process of deciding whether certain gas investments and nuclear investments should be considered as sustainable in the European taxonomy and what it has resulted. I ordered my presentation in three moments or three parts. The state of play of EU taxonomy, I won't extend on it. I'm sure you're very familiar with what taxonomies are, but just touching base to make sure that we are having the highlight. Then I'll go to how Greenpeace has been involved in the EU taxonomy process so far. And then I'll end with what I think is the most important for this conference and for the participants is the key takeaways from the European Union process, the taxonomy for the Thailand taxonomy. I'll keep it brief. I won't extend 10 minutes and then I'll open up for questions. So the taxonomy is supposed to be like a rating of what's green and what's not. If you think about the energy efficiency standards in some countries, that's supposed to be a AA. So when you invest in those categories or those products that have been labeled as green in the taxonomy, it should allow you to know that you're investing sustainably in a green way. There are 6 environmental objectives. We will focus on the climate mitigation part where the lessons in the involvement have been, but the EU taxonomy also concerns or has description of climate change adaptation, water and marine water resources use, circular economy, transition, pollution prevention control, and biodiversity and ecosystems protection. So the outset was to be very comprehensive, and as I was stressing, scientifically based. The activities that are included in the EU taxonomy should contribute to sustainability to at least one or more of the 6 environmental objectives that I just mentioned, and you have on the slide. Very importantly, it does not significantly harm any of the 6 environmental objectives. So when you talk about climate, it's not just about climate, but it shouldn't also harm, let's say, the water and marine resources, nor the pollution prevention and control. It complies with the minimum safeguards, so they are specified in the taxonomy regulation, and it complies with what are called the technical screening criteria. These are very technical things, but just a layout. So important, not only it contributes to sustainability, but does not significantly harm any of the other 6 objectives. When the Greenpeace was observing the process, there were a number of areas when we thought our participations might be important, but we got really involved when we seen that the discussion started to be about inclusion discussion, what elements of whether gas, fossil gas, and nuclear energy should be considered sustainable. The first gossips, rumors started in late 2021. The final draft of what was called the Complementary Delegated Act has been published in February and officially in March 2022. From the very outset, Greenpeace, different organizations, also Greenpeace EU, have been opposing the inclusion of both technologies as sustainable. We consider that you can say a lot about them, but they are definitely not sustainable. The process, it's concerned, as I said, climate change mitigation. Fast forward, this inclusion of certain new gas investment in new gas power plants and investment in both existing and new nuclear power plants has finalized by the approval of what was laid out in the Act, so approval of those 2 technologies in the EU by the European Parliament in July 2022, so last summer, and it entered into the force, which puts obligations on financial institutions for reporting as of January of this year. And for the more technical and legal arguments while Greenpeace is opposing those two technologies. I put a link to the briefing. This will be available for everybody. So we obviously didn't consider with all the problems in our history and also understanding of both climate change when it comes to gas and its fossil gas extraction, generation and transportations, and also to the different impacts of nuclear energy, especially the nuclear storage, which still on the world stage is not solved in any sustainable long-term way. And if we are speaking on Thailand, if we are speaking today, we just have to look at the controversy around the decision of the Japanese government and TEPCO to start dispersing the amounts of water that was gathered after Fukushima into the ocean, and how other countries are considering whether it's sustainable or not. So as I was saying, Greenpeace has been involved from the very beginning of this, what's called complementary delegated act, already when the draft had been out and there were rumors that the gas and nuclear would be in since the end of 2021. It very soon became clear that it was a pretty political rather than scientific process. The advisory body, which together combined scientists, financial experts, civil society, they abstained and walked out. They said that they were not consulted, but it became very unscientific, this debate. So from this moment, it was really high in the media. What was also, I'll come to this in a conclusion, was also very clear is that because it was political, both nuclear and gas have been made one package. It was an attempt to allow for it to pass in the European Parliament. So the pro-nuclear countries, headed by France, but not only, and those countries who really wanted to see gas sustainable, they decided that by putting it together and not discussing them separately, it should be done if you really want to understand, the impacts, would allow it to pass, and that made the discussion much more difficult, much more fact-based. So the first stage was for Greenpeace and civil society organizations to prepare arguments and convince both the Commission and the European members of the European Parliament not to consider those two technologies as sustainable and to vote against it. That hasn't succeeded. The European Parliament did approve the Climate Delegated Act. So currently the investments in new gas power plants in the European Union under meeting certain conditions and investment in nuclear, both existing upgrades and new power plants are considered. And because this was highly controversial and also a number of member states, so countries like Austria or Luxembourg, they were also saying they don't completely agree with this definition, especially for nuclear, and are taking the legal step against it. And it clearly caused a lot of polarization in the whole countries and financial sector of a certain country, opinions of what's green or not. So the opposite of what the taxonomy was supposed to do. Taxonomy was supposed to unify. This particular decision caused a fragmentation of the opinions on those elements. And Greenpeace announced already after that it will take legal steps against this Climate Delegated Act and the decision of inclusion of those technologies. And after the internal procedures that are required by law, it has filed an official lawsuit. 8 Greenpeace organizations, Greenpeace or different legal bodies, according to the country they're based, or they have their legal standing. So they filed a lawsuit to the court of the European Court of Justice against this inclusion, and we are now awaiting the procedures. This is the photo from April when it was filed. We consider it actually quite problematic when you talk about sustainability and you want to set the standard, but you contribute politically to greenwashing, because for us, the initial idea was to limit or set the standard so that the greenwashing is limited. So you actually are able to tell pretty much based on science which one is not. And this very controversial decision, actually, we consider political greenwashing. So giving political ability for certain technologies that are not green to be considered green, which goes against the idea. Now, very shortly, the key takeaways, the initial idea and the design, so those ramifications do no significant harm, not going against any other field with scientific bodies. Quite a lot of deliberation initially was very promising, and the disappointing part at the moment, the politics trumped science. It not only it lost its appeal, at some point there was hope that it might become some kind of standard internationally, and then when the policies and you could see around the world how different countries, Korea, etc., UK, were changing their previous taxonomies because they've seen how those decisions in the EU have been made. So it had created a very big debate and a lot of media articles, but also a lot of this probably more narrative discussion about nuclear being green or not, which in a sense is good, but that wasn't very helpful for taxonomy. What it also did with the inclusion of nuclear and fossil gas in a package, so as two together in one act, didn't allow for talking about one and the other separately on its merits, which again is against the intention of the science-based economy. And I was alluding to the end result is much more fragmented sustainable finance market. For example, Austrian or German finance institutions in a great extent saying nuclear is not sustainable, we don't have it in the funds, while French institutions being happy with it. So it led to more fragmentations rather than a unity, at least in this regard. And it also, because it became such a controversy, the next delegated act, those dealing with other areas, which I was mentioning, already with the hint of there's this lack of belief that it will also be purely scientific as there was an intention before, and that the policy will play a bigger role. I would say that these are the highlights and takeaways I would wanted to share with the honored speakers and participants, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kun Kuba, for sharing experience from working on the EU taxonomy and also your campaign from Greenpeace. Okay, we will come back to you with another round of questions at the panel afterward. But thank you very much again for sharing this one. Okay, ผมอาจจะขออนุญาตลองสรุปที่คุณกูป้าเล่าให้ฟัง
I'm going to summarize what Kun Kuba has said, because EU taxonomy is actually made before us, and the initial idea. So before the break, we actually heard about the global landscape of net zero, right? So the key word is that we need investment, a lot of investments to change from what we have today and to invest in a more green sector. So the word green, so what it means to be green, it links to the dictionary, right? So in Europe, they're trying to come up with this EU taxonomies, and they said that the investment in Europe, what would be considered green and what could transform the European economy into green economies and net zero economy. So what's important of what Kun Kuba has summarized, that what could you be put in the category of green, because it guides the decisions within the EU member countries. And then but the Greenpeace said that gas power plants or like nuclear power plant is a controversial issue, whether they are green or not, because nuclear doesn't release a lot of greenhouse gas, right? But why is it not green? But then on another side, there is a risk towards safety and other issues. So this is a controversial issue, and it's actually a key issue for our discussions here today. What could we decide about our investments and what should be desired to be included in our this transition? So the details is in designing the mechanisms for people to move towards the same direction, and that's why we have the event here today. And Greenpeace is one of the organizations that pushes, right, that you should not include new gas and nuclear into the green transitions, because if we align with the science-based evidence, we should not invest in fossils, we should not invest in nuclear. So coming back to Thailand and our sections, so this session is we'll talk about opportunities and challenges of the Thailand. I think the number what the speakers from last sessions present, if we want to do the NDCs by 2030, we need about 8,000 billion baht in investments, and if we move towards the net zeros, we need a lot more investments. And if we have those investments, where they should be put into what sectors to make it fair, to make it worth a value, and to make it timely. We've heard different countries, right? Because I'm going to recap, because a lot of countries think that going to net zero, it make them lose the competitiveness, right? But some of the countries think that like moving towards net zero would create a lot of jobs and a lot more economic activities. And you see that these two countries look at it differently, and what makes them different is the way they decide the transitions. So what the government and the private sector, how could they transition to that? And if you look at the countries that already have a net zero goals, but they don't have the technologies and the and the machines, and we have to import all of these from abroad, it means that we have higher costs because we don't have industry that supports the new technologies or the new machines. But for some countries to move forward net zeros, like we could do the strategies that this is the big investment, and how could we create this industry, and we could create these supply chains in our own country to compensate for all industries. So this is giving you the overall picture on climate finance and taxonomies. That's why they are important, and it will guide our investments in the future. Alright, so on these occasions, I'm going to ask each speakers to share their perspective of the Thailand wanting to become net zeros. How could you make Thailand achieve this goal that we could achieve net zero, and then we could overcome middle income trap? What kind of the new industry that could unlock the our country's GDP? And positions for green jobs in the future, what are some of those? So the first one is net zero, the second is the new economy, and then the third one, how to make the money that is going to circulate in these industries fair and equal. So it seems a bit difficult. I'm going to start with Kun Natee. From your 20 years of experience with CDM, what do you think about these issues? So I think it's an opportunity, and you mentioned about SMEs, right? I emphasize on this. Now we query about CBAM, but with this CBAM, it will impact on steels and aluminum of Thailand industries. But in the future, it could cover all industry, but that's another issue. But the steel and aluminums are trying to handle CBAM. Rest assured that now we understand the situation. What I worry the most, and I talk about this all the time, is corporate policies. I'm worried that the exports of Thailand, that eventually whether they're going to buy our product. So let's see if our products is emission embedded and we don't have the standards. We are afraid that they might not buy our products.
US ก็มีตลาดจีน
We have the exports, not just EU, but in the US, we had in China, and the foreign direct investment in Thailand. They have set a target, and it's not 2050 like the Thai government. That's the Thai government, right? Toyota set at 2035, not 2050. So you see, Toyota is let's see, it's the final assembly car, right? But then the entire supply chain into like micro SMEs, which are Thai companies. And only a few of them have knowledge on this, and I'm very worried. So that means that when big corporates want to achieve carbon neutrality 2050, it means that now the supply chains, they have to achieve that first. And now Toyota is using 2035. That means now the supply chains, they have to achieve this first. They want to use like 100% 5RE. How do we do this? Because in our our RE electricities, there's fossil in there, about 70% in our systems. So how could we use electricities for 100%? So let's see when large corporate has set the goal, right? The SMEs. Now the supply chains of Toyota, for example, they could set like RE 50% in 2030. This means in 6 to 7 years, we're going to use RE for 50%. 2050, we have to have more than 50% RE. So this is the first issue for me. And then you mentioned about designing, right? The transition. What I want to touch on is EPP, which Creagy is working on. Public-private partnership is very important because we know that to get an investment, it needs PPP. So when you want to do, liberalize the clean energy, you want to adapt the system in the factories. But in the end, you would say that we have to invest a lot of money to do smart grid, to do distributed gen. It requires a lot of money because the transfer while our governments and I want the Ministry of Energies to not worry, and the private sectors are actually ready. But the Ministry of Energies has to be clear. The government has to have clear objectives and directions that they're going so that private sector could support them. So if you go to the Budget Bureau, I have discussed with many organizations. Everyone's talked that they had the projects about climate change. But when you talk to the Budget Bureau, it's always get cut. Because it's not the mission, the main mission of that organization. But our bureaucratic system is silo. So we don't get the budget. So, and the budget, we should do issue-based budgeting. And this is the climate change issue-based budgeting. And the budget that is related to climate change has to be distributed to different bureaus, to different departments, so that we can move forward with this. Because the private sectors are ready, the financial sectors are ready. We are all ready. And we could only achieve the goal if the government is ready as well. And then on human resources, I actually admired the office, the Ministry of Higher Education. And they have changed many things. They have different updated educations. So with the current education systems now, if they study for a year and they find something interesting, they could go out and work on that and then they can come back and study. My companies right now never look at the certificates anymore.
เขาบอกเลยว่าดูเลยเด็ก
They said like we judge from whether they can be able to work on it or not. We don't care about graduations. We don't care about the degrees anymore. And this is very important. The Office of Higher Education has already adjusted, and then we have under the Office of Higher Education, they had a small unit that encourage competitiveness, and it's about innovation. What I'm trying to say is that Thailand has to redesign. We has to become a country that is brave enough to invest in R&D. 2 months ago, Denso, who is our largest supplier of Toyota, before that, they were one department of Toyota, but then they become separate companies, and they Denso, this Japanese company, and the main manufacturing base is in Thailand. They invite the Federation of Thai Industry, they invite the TDI, they invite the Committee of Energy Regulations. Why do they invite us? They invite us to look at the carbon capture. They didn't expect us to learn about that, but what they want from us, because Denso Thailand has a Thai CEO last year, first time. Otherwise, it's always been like Japanese ex-CEO. With the initiative of this Thai CEO, they want us to go and to tell the boss in Japan, the company's boss in Japan, please tell my boss who working on R&D in Thailand, please move R&D to Thailand or work on R&D in Thailand. Otherwise, the custom would be they would do R&D in Japan before they distribute that knowledge to different countries or different factories. But then so in Thailand, they want to do R&D in Thailand so they could understand the ecosystem and limitations of our own countries so that R&D could be faster. And secondly, it actually made me think that the private companies are ready and the government should be ready too. PTT is working on this as well. So this is like most important. And hydrogen, a lot of private companies are working on.
มันกลับมาตอบคือผมบอกจะเรียนอย่างนี้ว่า carbon capture มันมาตอบโจทย์
Carbon captures is like as what Greenpeace said about that he disagrees with the new gas and nuclear, right? And they filed a lawsuit. And COP26, 27, they were very controversial about phasing out fossils, while on the other side saying that you should phase down. Thailand and ASEAN has to think about this as well, about our base, our infrastructure, the investment that we have put in. Suddenly you're going to phase out, like it's difficult. For example, like natural gases, how much PTT has invested in. Tomorrow you said, oh, no more natural gas. How PTT gonna do? That's mean the infrastructure that they invested in is waste. That's why we calling it just transition. We have to systematically phase down. I saw in the plan, like no new coal power plant in the first 2 phases, and I think that's phased down. So the old one could slowly defunct. We have to plan it like this. Into plans and steps, make sure that our investment is worthy. And we talk about the infrastructure of fossils, right? That's the worst carbon capture to help And on
ผม
hydrogen,
จะบอกว่า RE เนี่ยมันคือคำตอบแหละ
RE is the answer
ก๊าซเรือนกระจกทั้งหมดคือฟอสซิล
because we talked that all the issues of greenhouse gas is fossils. That's why we need to use RE to
ทีนี้เนี่ย
compensate
จะ
fossils.
เรียกว่าฟอสซิลเนี่ยโทษ RE เนี่ยจริงๆเป็นกรีนบลัด
RE is green blood,
ไฮโดรเจนถ้าไม่มีกรีนเข้าไปไม่มี RE
and
เข้าไปเนี่ย
hydrogen doesn't have the green, is not
อัน
green.
นี้เป็นเรื่องสำคัญ
So this is very important. And another important thing is
ยอด
EV.
จำหน่ายรถ EV พุ่งแบบเกินคาดนะ
So EV sales in the countries
อยู่ในรถ EV น่าจะเป็น
shot up,
10%
but there's still fossils in the EV cars. But how do we transition to this? So
เพื่อจะได้
how could
ให้
we
ไฟสีเขียวอยู่
make
ในรถมาก
RE so there's more green electricities in the car?
เพราะฉะนั้น RE มันก็เหมือน green
So I think RE is very important. It's clean but feeding into vehicles, into hydrogen, into EV.
ไอ้ตรงนี้แหละครับจะกลับมาเปลี่ยนตรงนี้ยังไงเนี่ย
So how could we deal with this RE? I think policy is required.
นะครับการเปิดเสรีซื้อขายพลังงานไฟฟ้าต้องเกิดขึ้น
We had to
ก็
have
คือการไฟเนี่ย
the free
โรงงานที่
trade
อยู่
on
อยู่ชลบุรี
electricity.
จะไปซื้อไฟฟ้า RE จากผมเนี่ยลง
So
ไฟฟ้า
if
Biomass ที่สุราษฎร์เนี่ยซื้อได้ครับแต่ถามว่าให้ผมต่อสายส่งไปกันเองหรือไม่ใช่ครับ
so
ส่ง
the
ไฟตามสายส่งปกติที่มีอยู่นี่แหละ
the whole infrastructures has to be changed of the countries
ไม่ได้ละเพราะโรงงานนั้นจะมาซื้อไฟตรงกับ
because let's say Plant A want to buy RE from
สิ่ง
Plant
ที่เกิดขึ้น
B.
คืออะไรครับ
You don't need to like pay for different to separate grid. With PTT, they have like the third party access that they could allow other natural gases to come into the pipe. It's not monopoly. You can pay the fee. It's the same. I think we can pay for the grid fee.
ได้ revenue จากค่าผ่านสาย
So you could gain revenues from the grid fee, but it's a virtual PPA contract where they sign between that the buyers is guaranteed to buy electricity from me, and then I guarantee that I would produce 100% RE of electricity.
เขาได้ใช้ไฟ RE 100%เห็นไหมฮะ RE 100%ไม่ได้
So RE 100% is not only physical, it's like format or model.
เราต้องเปลี่ยนจาก regulated market
We have to change from regulated market into the regulated market.
จำไม่ได้แล้วกี่ปีมันค่อนข้างนานจนผมลืมมันเริ่มปีไหนยังไม่ทำนะครับคือประเด็น
The Ministry of Energy keep using regulated
เพราะนโยบายมันอยู่แค่นี้ตรงนี้เองนะครับ
regulated market, and I think it needs to be changed. And if we can work on this, it could help. Or FDPA.
เหมือนกันนะครับคือเป็นการทำโดยไม่ใช่ว่าต้องเอาไปโอ้โหเดินสายส่งต่อเชื่อมกันเองไม่ใช่
You don't have to build new grids. It could use the old grids, and you can manage it by making contracts with that also allow EGAT and PAE to drive.
ผมคิดว่า3การไฟฟ้านี่เขาก็พร้อมนะครับที่จะเดินไปสู่จุดนั้นนะครับก็ในช่วงแรกนี้ก็น่าจะ
So I think this is from me for the first part. Thank you, Kun Natee. So I'm going to summarize what Kun Natee has proposed about 5 changes. The first one is infrastructure. So we have the hard infrastructure, right? We have the grid line, and then we have the soft side, which are regulations. I think in the past, Thailand, our infrastructure support fossils, but how could we change from fossil-based infrastructure? It's not like we can just, cancel out all the infrastructure. And then second one, it's changing budget allocation. In the future, if we going to change the infrastructure to be aligned with more climate finance, it has to align with that. And then third, we need to change people. We need to upskill our people. 4, we have to change the ecosystems. When Kunati talked about this, I got reminded of Shenzhen in China. because they have the entire ecosystems in one country. And if we're going toward net zero, then we should have the ecosystem from the upstream to downstream. And then 5, we have to change the enhanced single buying market and RE. So when you discussed it, I forgot one issue. I confirm that this is not politicals. You have to change the constitutions. Everyone thinks about politics, but I think it's very important when you said that utilities of the government, it has to be 50% under the government. But I think this needs to be changed. And you see that these private companies produce electricities more than EGAT. But when they include the grids, the EGAT has the highest number of production, right? This you have to change in the constitutions. Otherwise, you cannot change the infrastructures.
Okay ครับเดี๋ยวคุยกันได้อีกยาวนะครับประเด็นนี้โอเคงั้นเชิญท่านต่อไป
So next
ต่อที่รัฐธรรมนูญพอดีค่ะ เริ่มอยากเปลี่ยนหัวข้อไม่ใช่แต่เห็นด้วยนะคะกับคุณ
I agree with คุณนาที
จริงๆมันอยู่ที่การตีความเหมือนกัน
I think it depends on interpretation. If we think that the government is regulator,
ใครจะผลิตใครจะส่งไม่เป็นไรอย่างเงี้ยก็ไม่เป็นไร
as long as the government is regulator, it's fine. Whoever is going to produce or who going to send the electricities. So on these 3, how could we make their economy grow, reduce the gases, and make the countries more equal? I think Thailand has a capacity, but we have not thought about it seriously, and we have not have a political party that addresses issues holistically. I think the idea of BCG is interesting, but in practicalities seems to be in silo. I think there are 5 issues that we should explore to gain all 3 benefits. So when we talk about climate finance, we have to be clear about what is the goal. We're trying to reduce mitigation and adaptation, right? And I feel that Thailand, we don't really talk about adaptations. We're actually in the top 10 country who are the most vulnerable from climate change. And of course, people who are most impacted by this going to be the vulnerable group. So I think with the adaptations, if we reframe them, that focus on climate finance instead of focusing on, for example, like bank giving green loans, it's challenging. But if if they give green loans, but they still have a big part on fossil fuel, it doesn't work. So we have to think of it in terms of transition finance. So we could provide incentive for banks to give green loans that comes from changing customers who were brown or who were fossils into green. They should get additional incentive from the government. So I think this would benefit. So instead of thinking of how you reduce the brown and you increase the green, you can think of this as the same process. So this is corresponds to Kun Natee's PPP idea. So reduce brown and increase green at the same time. I would use the word transition finance. And next, so for the transition finance to take place and encourage climate adaptation, I think this is about calculation, because when we're in finance, I was look at feasibilities, I would look at loans, and it takes a long time.
ถ้าเกิดไม่เอาเรื่องของการประหยัดคือผลกระทบเนี่ยถ้ามองในมุมกลับมันคือสิ่งที่เราประหยัดได้ คือเวลาเราคิดว่าอย่างเช่นเวลาบอกเราจะได้อะไรจากการทำเรื่อง climate
So when we think about what we gain from doing climate, when you look at the climate mitigation, you will not see it clearly. You may see investment, you may see that you can save on some budget or like carbon or CBAM, but you have not seen about the potential of income that could come from here. But if you look at the climate adaptations like environmental, economics, let's see if we don't do anything and we let the situation get worse, it could be like PM 2.5 into the flood, and then we could see the number, the loss that could equal to a lot of money. How, let's say it's a trillion baht, and if we want to avoid this trillion baht by investing 80,000 million baht, it's better than not doing anything. But it's not easy because like who's going to be able to calculate that the amount of money from not doing anything is a trillion baht. So I think it's important to do the impact calculation and then look at it on like how on saving the damage cost that could occur later. So that it's a cost saving that financial institutions could understand and look at. And that leads me to the third issues when you talk about the climate adaptation. And of course this touches on inequalities because it could help the vulnerable group. There is an international mechanism. If you look at COP26, COP27, the developing countries are requiring that, like, because the developed countries has release greenhouse gases more than developing countries. That's why the developed countries should help them. That's why we talk about loss and energy fund. And we are in the top 10 of vulnerable countries. We should play a role. And this is finance climate. It should close the gap on financing, especially on climate adaptation. Another example that is just energy transition partnership, and there are many countries that work on this on South Africa, Indonesia, and Vietnam. And for our country, if we want to take part in this is international mechanisms. How could we involve and to justify that Thailand should be invited to that collaboration? Climate funds that we these funds from international, I think Thailand should be part. And I think that it needs structuring. And then fourth issue, I want to talk about the criteria of insurance mechanisms. It's a shame that we have insurance regulators, right? But we don't have any organizations that look at like insurance mechanisms. So actually, because insurance is financial tools, right? And it's a tool that can be used to help with climate change. I think this is an opportunity. We don't have the insurance mechanisms to insure for the risk during the transitions. And I think the fifth issue if we think that climate finance, we do not look at the profit, right? But we look at the climate change mitigation or net zeros. It means that we have to prioritize the validation process, the verification, monitoring, reporting more than mainstream finance. Because like when you issue bonds, you look at it whether it has credit, whether it's believable, right? There is a risk, the way to do the risk elevation, and there's way to do monitoring. But when on like climate finance, because it's new, right? And it's environment and it's about society. So how could we build the ecosystem for people in finance to help evaluate that the project is actually green or not? We should have a monitoring system, for example, like carbon market. It should be like, you cannot claim the trees that already have been grown for 20 years. You could only claim a tree that has just recently been grown or like newly grown. So that's why we need experts from other fields that are not just finance personal to join in this. So these are 5 issues for me that I think are important to driving the change. Thank you very much. I'm a nerd on climate front and I'm quite amazed and I think I'm excited and inspired that we have a lot of things to work on. And I have to invite my colleagues to what Kun Sarinee just said. In the past, we always separate economies from environment, right? But right now we have to combine them together. And then before, we always look at those who emit as the opposite, right? But they may not intend to emit the gas. So right now, how could we include them back and make them part of the process and then work together? And now we go into the Bank of Thailand. Same questions.
จริงๆแล้วนะคะนก3ตัวคือเป็นเรื่องบรรลุ net zero ใช่ป่ะคะแล้วก็
So your 3 goals are net zeros
ทำให้ประเทศ resilient ต่อความเสี่ยงใช่ไหมคะ
the resilience to risk. I think we have taxonomy for this, and this is the green dictionary so that everyone understands green in the same way.
เราลองแรงตัวคือเรามุ่งไปทางการลดการปล่อยก๊าซก่อน
Because we go, the directions that we are moving forward is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So energy and transport sectors are the first sectors that we are working on. We have asked for collaborations to do these taxonomies under the working team that are joined by both the government agencies and the private sectors. Kun Natee was in the working committee as well to give opinions whether they really work.
ซึ่งเราใช้วิธีที่จะกำหนดเป็นมีเงื่อนไขและก็ตัวชี้วัดที่ชัดเจน
So we have clear conditions, clear objectives, and we have the clear verifications. So these could avoid greenwashing, because if we moving like the green economies with net zero, we have to avoid greenwashings to make the green really green. So besides the government sector and the private sectors, we also have financial sector joining us, like the banks in Thailand and the associations of financial institutes. We do public hearing, and Sarinee was help us and give us some opinion on the taxonomy. So this taxonomy is not just from, Bank of Thailand and the SEC, but it comes from many different sectors that this could be the infrastructure to reduce greenwashing.
ถัดจากนั้นไปก็คือนอกจากที่มันเป็นเรื่องเกี่ยวกับการเ เป็น dictionary สีเขียวแล้ว
So besides being the green dictionary, we want it to be the document because we have measures, right, that you have to release certain amount of gas to get the green. But then in the future, there will be more technologies, and this is and the technologies that we think is green today might not be green in the future. So this is so the taxonomy will be mending documents. That means the content in the taxonomies can be mended at all time. It's changeable. And the third issues, because BOT oversees the banks, right? And we expect that the banks or the financial institutions would apply taxonomies for them to evaluate their positions. Taxonomy didn't say that green is good or like amber is bad or red is bad, but taxonomy are trying to say how could you help reduce greenhouse gas emissions to understand your position, whether you are at green, the project you invest or fund, whether they're amber or at red. So this is for the banks to understand themselves and to screen all their ports and their portfolio to see how much green they have, how much amber they have, and how much red they have, so they could come up with a plan to mitigate the risk. Because if they had a port that's full of like red, in the future, you know that these are risks. You would have physical risk. For example, like if you use a lot of fossils, flood, natural disaster, and then you also have transition risk. Both of these risks, and if these are in red or in amber where you have to adjust, the banks could help adjusting themselves and the company that they invest in or issuing products that help their clients or customers to change. I'm not sure like how much people are familiar with taxonomy. So taxonomies are green dictionary, right? That say what kind of economic activities are friendly to environment. So we do the traffic light systems. We have green, amber, and red. So green is environmental friendly, and red is non-environmental friendly. Activities like fossil fuel production, but amber is amber is something that's suitable for a transitional period. So other taxonomy doesn't have this amber yet, but because we want the transitions to take place, that's why we include amber in there. So amber is special features that added in here and is different from the ones in EU that Mr. Kuba has mentioned. EU is green and red, but for Thailand we have this amber category. So if you look at transition finance, so these are infrastructures for banks to understand that many economic activities that they support could be changed from amber to green, and this could help fuel transitional finance.
ครับก็ขอบคุณทางธนาคารแห่งประเทศไทยมากนะครับผมว่าก็เห็นภาพคือเท่าที่ผมจับประเด็นได้เนี่ยก็คือตัว taxonomy นี่ก็เป็นกลไกสำคัญนะครับอันที่หนึ่งคือเรามีตัวที่เรามาเฟสแรกเนาะที่พลังงานขนส่งเป็นจุดเริ่มต้นนะครับแล้วก็อย่างที่ทางแบงค์ชาติได้บอกไปก็คือเราก็ทำงานร่วมกันทำมาก็คือว่ามันเป็นไดนามิกพิกเจอร์แล้วก็ดิกชันนารีแล้วก็การทำเฟสแรกมันก็คือเป็นไพลอตนะครับ
The first phase is a pilot, right? So we have to have trial and error.
ทางสภาอุดเองหรือหน่วยงานภาครัฐหรือว่า
And then
ทางธนาคาร
the
ต่างๆ
government
เอาไปใช้เนี่ย
agencies
ก็
or the
จะต้อง
banks
มี
can
การปรับปรุง
apply.
นะครับก็เป็นโอกาสที่ทำให้พวกเราเนี่ย
So
มา
this
ช่วย
is
กันนะครับมาเชฟ
opportunities
ไอ้ตัว
for
เนี้ย
us
ให้
to
ตัว dictionary
shape
ตัวเนี้ยมัน
this
มันฟิตกับบริ
taxonomy
บทของเรา
to
แล้วก็
fit
โดย
with
เฉ
the
พาะในเรื่องของ
context
transition
of our
finance เนี่ย
companies
เป็นจุด
and
สำคัญเลย
for
ว่าเรา
transition
จะมีความ
finance.
เร็วช้ายังไงนะครับไอ้ก้อนสี
And
เหลื
the
องเนี่ยแล้วมัน
pace
ดูองค์ประกอบที่มันครบถ้วนนะครับนอกจากเรื่อง climate อย่างที่ EU เขาก็ดูองค์ประกอบอื่นดู no net harm significant harm อะไรต่างๆตามมาด้วยนะครับแต่อันนี้ก็เป็นภาพใหญ่เนาะ
So this is the overall
โอ
picture.
เคเช่นครับคุณนาที
ไม่อยากให้หลุดเดี๋ยวผมลืมคือเวลาเราพูดเรื่องพลังงานฝาก
So
Creagy ไว้
when
ด้วย
we
เวลาเราบอกว่าใครเป็นอิมิเตอร์ใหญ่สุด
when we said
นะ
like who's
เรา
the
จะบอก
biggest
พลังงานบวก
emitter, you would say that is transportation and energy, right? And then next, it would be agriculture for 15%.
IPPU
There's
ผล
IPPU,
ผลิตอุตสาหกรรม
นั่นนะครับ
industrial
อันนี้แหละมันไม่ใช่มิส
process
แต่บาง
and
คน
product.
ไม่ได้เจาะลึกหรือลงรายละเอียดก็จะเข้าใจผิดอุตสาหกรรมนิดเดียวเห็นไหม
People would, if you don't go into details, people would understand that industrial is such a small portion. But I want you to break it down for the transportation sector and energy sector. So energy sector is supplying, right? The power plant that emit the greenhouse gas, but there's a demand side, and who use them? It's the industrials, right? So in the industrials, it's in the energies, and then the transportation also has customer. So when you present this, I want it to be breakdown for you to understand that even the biggest emitter actually has other sectors that supports them.
เพราะว่าการแบ่งกลุ่ม
I think this is very good because
UNFCCC กำหนด
this is they
แต่ว่า
divided
ไม่
by
ได้เป็นการแบ่งตามกลุ่มเศรษฐ
UNFCCC.
กิจจริงๆเราควรจะแบ่งเป็นผู้เล่นว่า
Actually, we should divide it into
หรือว่า
like
ที่อยู่อาศัย
players.
เท่าไหร่ใช่ไหมการ
For
ค้า
example, like
แล้วก็ธุรกิจ
housing, how
แล้วก็
many
กิจกรรม
percent,
เศรษฐกิจก่อ
and
สร้าง
then like
ต่างๆแล้วก็
industrials,
พวกนั้นเป็นกิจกรรมที่ทำ
like
พลังงาน
constructions.
อันนี้เห็นด้วยเลยนะครับจะได้เห็นภาพ
I totally agree with
โอเค
Natee.
งั้นเดี๋ยวผมลองขอกลับมาที่เพราะว่าคุณทางกรีนพีซอาจจะเหงานิดนึงนะครับ
So I'm afraid Mr. Kuba
เผื่อ
might
เขา
get
จะมีอะไรแช
lonely.
ร์เป็น lesson learn ให้กับเรา
So I
นะครับ
want him to
May I
share
ask a
about
question,
lesson learned.
to คุณกูบ้านะครับโอเค because we heard about what you have done to suggest the EU taxonomy, right? So and then you have passed already that stage before. So looking back to Thailand, maybe if there are any recommendations or suggestion from your knowledge for Thailand to maybe because we just have the Thailand Taxonomy phase 1 and then we are going to develop the second and the third phase. So maybe if there are any suggestion from you to guide us, please feel free ครับ
Thank you for the kind words and minding if I'm lonely or not. I have been listening very carefully to the debate. I think that one thing about the taxonomy, or two things about the taxonomy, which I will stress and related, and then one about insurance because it was mentioned. There's quite some interesting developments and thinking in Europe about what's called the insurance gap. So the part about the economy that is not being covered by insurance. So whenever there is a damage occurring as a result of climate change, this is actually loss. So you can look at losses in different ways, losses that are insured and will be rebuilt, or losses that will be permanently damage to the economy. So I'll start from this because I've already went. There is the good paper from the European regulator of insurance and pension funds called EIOPA, together with European Central Bank from this year, exactly discussing the involvement or the potential involvement of public authorities into covering those spaces that are called the insurance gap. Because as I have heard, Thailand is one of those countries that is quite highly vulnerable to the impacts of the ongoing climate crisis. On the taxonomy, I think this is my personal. There was quite a lot of debate when there was the inclusion of gas and nuclear, exactly about the amber category or the orange category, and making sure that green, that is uncontroversial, and that we fully agree, sustainable renewables, etc., but those that there is no scientific debate about it, or kept as green. And exactly, you have those categories when there might be disagreements from science and civil society for transitory purposes, allowing them some time before they go to green. I think it's a pretty wise distinction in order to make sure that the green is green, and anything that doesn't make it to green is somewhere in between, but doesn't mean that it's red. And I would stress one more thing, which we found quite interesting, or like to say the least, in the EU approach. When talking about gas and nuclear, that was the green category was given only to investments within the EU. So exactly the same kind of investments out of the EU would not be classified as sustainable, which begs the questions: how is it that the same investment scientifically in different places has different labels? So I would advise any discussion or any standards for Thailand to be consistent domestically and internationally. And I wish all the best. I'm nobody to advise, just sharing experiences.
Okay, thank you, Kun Kuba. Maybe can you explain a little bit again on the insurance gap? What does it mean that you mentioned about the challenge?
Yes, so I can even share with the organizers the white paper by the European Central Bank. We are one of those continents who has a central bank covering more than one country because of Eurozone, so it's quite special, which in times of crisis, of course, makes it difficult. It's a different circumstance, right? One covering all. The realization is that even with the very fast forwards, you could say galloping impacts of climate change, depending on the country culture, there's a substantial amount of property, private property, households, residential assets that are not being insured. And are not being insured neither by the government nor by climate change. Suffice to say, in early August, there was 36 hours of rain in Slovenia, and then 2/3 of the country got flooded. It results that the majority of this infrastructure that's going to be rebuilt will have to go from the public budget. So the thinking in the white paper I highly recommend by the Insurance Association and regulator in Europe and the European Central Bank is: how do you incorporate levels of, let's say, the ladder of protection when there is a public guarantee or public element of security built into various levels of insurance and reinsurance? Because in the end of the day, if there is none, the buck is still with the public money and the government having to step in case of disaster. So you also are observing a process which is quite alarming when it comes to insurance coverage. But those regions or those places that are most vulnerable and to the impacts of hurricane, fire, wildfires, floods, are being either the insurance industry is either withdrawing the insurance cover there or raising the premiums in such a way that it becomes almost impossible for the residents to maintain their insurance. So with other costs going up. So you're ending up with residents in states like California, Texas, or Florida, in the US, one of the communities that is the largest in the world, not being able to find cover, while at the same time the insurance industry still provides support for, among others, fossil fuel industry, right, on causing the issue. So the role and the thinking about the merger or on involvement of the public institutions into what used to be quite, to a majority extent, the private sector, because of the speed and because of the impacts and increase of severity of climate cost, or made more frequent and more severe natural disasters, is, I would say, of very high importance. Seems like a pretty niche topic, but it's really worth to to consider it, including what are the conditions for reconstruction, because most of the time when damage happens and it's not planned, people tend to do the quickest and the urgent to have their basic needs satisfied, which by definition does not necessarily apply to, that necessarily match with zero carbon. So I think both on the insurance side and on the reconstruction side, there's a lot of thinking how to already incorporate the increasing damage that we will know will happen from climate change into making sure that our societies evolve faster towards non-carbon or zero carbon societies. I've already spoken quite a lot, but
okay, thank you very much. That's
more time if you allow me, but I think that's enough.
Actually, we discussed this point earlier before with Kun Yui here, that she suggests about the insurance products that in Thailand, because we only have the regulated insurance products, but we don't have the agency to do the planning for insurance. And I think this is maybe brought to the gap that we have, because someone have to see the big picture to decide what available product we should have in the market, right? โอเคขอบคุณมากครับ thank you very much โอเคเวลาผ่านไปเร็วมากเลยนะครับนี่เรารอบแรกแต่ว่าผมว่าผมอยากจะขออนุญาตลองเปิดโปรก่อนเพราะว่า
So I'm gonna try to open up the floor first for people here if they have any questions. Pause for the opportunity like this to have 3 speakers with us. It's quite rare. So I would take in any questions from the floors and or any suggestions from the floor and online. Please pass the mic. I'm from Sumitomo Bank. I want to ask about insurance that Kun Sarinee and Greenpeace had mentioned. I understand that 2011 we have the great flood, right? At the industrial estate, many industrial estate has made insurance. So Kun Sarinee, could you, when you said this is the opportunity for the bank industries, what is it like? Thank you.
จะขยายได้ไหมนะ
Would I be able to expand this?
คือคิดว่าเป็นประเด็นที่เราน่าจะลอง
I think it's an issue that we should look at more.
คือจริงๆประเด็นเมื่อกี้ที่คุณคูบาพูดเนี่ยประเด็น
That's what Kun Kuba has said. It's about challenges
บริษัทประกันที่เขา
because the insurance companies they could insure like natural disaster. They may have decreasing incentives. I mean, they have less and less incentives to do natural disaster insurance because the natural disaster occurs more often, or it could be really high premium. So let's say if this is the issue, should the government come and help? What about loss and damages fund from internationals? Should it help? I look at insurance into 2 aspects. The first one is insurance to help the vulnerable groups from climate change. Could they have tools to handle the risk? And in Thailand, I'm not sure, like with the private sectors, how would they be able to work on this? I know someone who work on the insurance for the indexes of agricultural yields. There's no clear incentive for the private sector yet. But what this insurance is about, it means that it could tap into the international mechanisms. And it could be like useful tools. I look at from the climate adaptations perspective. So from now on, let's say if banks want to support the customers, and the customers that we try to change the focus onto climate adaptation more, and if we could link the insurance here, it could help the banks to support clients more.
แต่ก็คงต้องไปคิดกลไกที่มัน
But I think we have to come up with mechanisms
ของภาคการเงินด้วย
that have you to look at both the incentive size for the financial institutions and then the other side of helping the vulnerable.
โอเคครับขอท่านหน้านะครับเชิญผอ.ประเสริฐสุข
นะคะฉันชื่อประเสริฐสุขนะคะก็เป็น former
My name is Prasad Suk. Used to be a director. I'm a former director of GTO. On this insurance, we've discussed about this for 10 years since we work about climate change, even in COP, like Conference of the Parties, right? There's like many records on insurance, but in practice, it using insurance system to use with adaptations. It depends on each country, but I think the country that really works on this is Japan. The research team, I think you should look into the Japanese insurance company, Mitsuho, maybe. They work on these insurance systems and they insure for the natural disaster that come from climate change.
ไม่ใช่แบงก์ญี่ปุ่นบริษัทประกันภัยของญี่ปุ่นซึ่งฉันเคยไปตอนที่ไปหารือกับเขาที่ญี่ปุ่น
When I discuss with them in Japan, I understand that this one company, I'm not sure, probably Mitsuho.
น่าจะเป็นมิซูโฮเนี่ยเขาใหญ่มากตอนนี้
Mitsuho is really big, right? And they have branches in many countries, including Thailand, and they work on insurance. And you can study their systems because there are the type of countries that have a lot of natural disaster, so they are experienced in this. So in applying this to Thailand for like the insurance company interested in helping the agricultural sectors or any sectors that impacted by the natural disaster or climate change, I think it would be good. And I think if we push forward with this, it will be one of the way to mitigate the risk. Thank you, Director Prasad Suk. I'd like to share a little bit more on this as Sarinee has mentioned about the feasibility studies and calculated risk. I think what we're missing in Thailand is it's hard for us to calculate this because we lack data. We don't know how much damages we have. So I think we have to begin with data so that we could translate physical risk into financial risk to our assets and our businesses. And from that point on, when we can quantify the risk, we can price the premium for insurance better, and then we have the new financial products.
ทำงานในเชิงภาครัฐอันนี้ค่ะมันเป็นที่มาของไปเนี่ย
So this is like we would have a law that we're trying to enact, and one of the articles said that is data reporting. So, but law enforcement is not as good as determination. If you have correct data, we could do a lot of things with that data. And it could create that fair transitions. Today we have a lot of like estimated data or expected data. That's why we can't really find solutions that fit everyone. So I think from now on, once the law is enacted, the data reporting will be more concrete and more serious because right now we have digitizations, right? The digital and the private sectors can work on it. And then data collections, data reporting of the greenhouse gases emissions could help the private companies to plan the future of that company and to do risk mitigation.
คือทุกประเทศจะต้องมีการทำ
Every country has to propose
อย่างที่เราบอกว่าเรามี NDC
because we have NDC, right?
NDC คือสิ่งที่ประเทศไทยแสดง
Is
ว่า
what
เรามี
Thailand
ประเทศไทยเราจะช่วยลดน่ะ
trying to reduce. There is one chapter
ท่านต้องการ
that
การสนับสนุนอะไร
the countries could ask for support,
การวิเคราะห์การบริหารความ
and
เสี่ยง
in that Thailand has put in that we lack resources on doing data analysis.
คุณบุญรอดพูดถึงว่า
As Kun Boonrod said about the analysis of
ประเทศ
this,
ไทยเรายังอาจจะมีคนเก่ง
said
อยู่
that
แต่
there
มีไม่มาก
might
พอ
be
แต่
like
ท่านนั่งอยู่ในห้องเนี้ยท่านเห็นหน้าจะเป็นคนเก่งสามารถทำได้
we have a lot of
กำลัง
people
คนเรา
with
มีอยู่แค่นี้
skills,
นะคะ
but we
ปัญหา
might have
ใหญ่
limited human
แต่เราก็
resource,
มีความ
but the
จำเป็น
issue
ต้อง
is
มี
quite big.
การดึงเอาคนที่
So
เชี่ยว
we
ชาญ
need
จากต่างประเทศ
to
มาช่วยเรา
need to have an experts from abroad and help us with the existing data, because we might not be familiar with how to analyze this kind of data or this kind of risk.
ขอบคุณมากๆครับมีคำถามหรือว่าข้อเสนอ
Is
แนะ
there
อื่
any
นๆไหม
other
ครับหรือว่าจาก
questions
ออน
or
ไลน์
suggestions
ทาง
or
ด้านหลัง
even from online or in the back, please?
สวัสดีครับปรเมศจาก
Hello,
TGO นะครับ
I'm Paramet from TGO.
ตัว Thailand Taxonomy เนี่ยก็ออกมาสักพัก
So
แล้วที่
Thailand
ผมสงสัย
Taxonomy
ครับว่า
has been
ตัวภาค
issue
สถาบัน
for a
การเงิน
while,
ได้ลอง
right?
เอาตัว criteria
I
ที่ใน
wonder if the
Taxonomy
banks
เอา
has
ไป
already applied
จั
the
ดเกณฑ์ใน
criteria
พอร์ตการลงทุน
in
ตัวเอง
the
หรือยังครับ
investment port yet?
ตอนนี้มันเป็นยังไงบ้างแล้วก็
And do you have
มี
any
แก็ปอีกเยอะไหม
update?
ฮะที่
Is there a lot
ที่
of
แบบ
gap
จัดไม่ได้หรืออะไรอย่างเงี้ยครับ
that for like where they cannot categorize according to
ก็คือ
the
ว่า
categories
จริงๆ
in the
แล้วนะคะ
taxonomy?
ได้เคยสื่อสารกับธนาคารไปแล้วบาง
We
ส่วน
have
ว่าเราอยากจะให้
communicated
เขา
to
ลอง
some
แมปกับของ
banks
ตัวเองแล้วก็
that we want
อาจจะ
them
ยัง
to
เป็น
use
แค่
the
การรายงานกลับมา
taxonomy
ที่แบงก์ชาติ
to
ก่อน
map
ว่า
with their own
ใช่
part and the report
เนื่องจาก
back
เป็น
to
เฟสแร
Bank
ก
of
ค่ะแล้วก็ที่
Thailand
บอกใช่ไหมคะ
because
ก็
this
คือ
is
อยา
the
กจะ
first
ให้ลอง
phase, right?
เอ่อ
We want them
ทำดูก่อน
to
ว่ามัน
you know
สอด
try
คล้องแค่ไหน
first
มีแก็ปตรงไหนอยู่บ้าง
whether it works or
แล้ว
not
ก็
and what
คิ
are
ด
some
ว่า
of the
น่าจะ
gaps.
ได้เริ่มให้เขารายงานกลับมาน่าจะเป็นปีหน้า
And I think they could
ทีนี้จริง
report
ๆแล้วตัว
back
taxonomy
to
เองเนี่ย
us
มันเป็นแค่
about next
มาตร
year.
ฐานตรงกลางนะคะ
So
ที่แบบว่า
taxonomy
เรา
is
ต้อง
like
การ
just
sharing เราจะให้พวกเขามาเขียนให้ตรง
criteria,
กัน
right?
แต่ว่ามันยังต้องมีคู่มืออื่น
But it has to be like
เช่น
additional
การประเมินเราจะประเมิน
guidelines.
ขั้นไหนเอา
For
แค่
example, like
necessary
evaluation,
พอหรือว่าเราจะ
should
ต้อง
we
ดันไป
do
ถึง
like
สุด
necessary level
การใช้
or
taxonomy เนี่ยมันจะสามารถโยงไปถึง
in
การ
using
ทำ
this
เป็น
taxonomy? Should
industry
we
handbook ที่เพื่อ
should we
ที่จะ
make
ไป
like
ออก
industry handbook
สามารถสนับสนุนสินเชื่อได้ไหมคืออันเนี้ย
so
มัน
that
เป็น
it could
มัน
support
มัน
credits,
ยังมี
giving credits?
ทางที่จะไปต่อ
There
ได้
are
แต่ในเบื้องต้นตอนนี้คือเราแค่ลองให้ตอนนี้ให้แบง
there
ค์
are
ลอง
many
อ่านดู
many
ลองถ้ามีคำถามอะไรก็ยัง
ways
สามารถ
that
กลับไป
could
ที่
be
คณะทำงานที่ทำ
done.
ได้
I mean, like after doing these
ก่อนแต่ว่า
taxonomies, there are
ถ้า
other
ถามว่า
guidelines
ตอน
that
นี้
could
เป็
be
นยังไง
made.
ทุกคนกำลัง
If you
อยู่
ask what is the
ระหว่าง
update
การ
of the progress,
พิจารณา
right
แล้ว
now
ก็ทำตาม
is
ความ
during
พร้
the
อม
process
แล้ว
of
ก็
having
เราก็คาดหวั
banks
งว่ามันจะกลายเป็นจุด
comparing
ยึด
their
โยงค่ะ
ports
ที่แบงค์
to
สา
the
มารถดำเนินตัวเอง
criteria
ได้
that
ก่อน
we given
แล้วก็พอมีข้อ
and
มูล
make
ที่พร้อม
them
แล้วสามารถ
able
วาง
to
ทั้ง priority
evaluate
sector ได้
themselves
ที่
where
priority
they
sector
are
ไม่จำเป็นจะต้อง
and then
เป็
they
น
could
โซน
prioritize
พ
the
ลังงานขนส่ง
sectors
ค่ะอาจจะ
and
เป็น
it
ตัว
doesn't have to
sector
be
ที่มีความหมายมีความสำคัญในแง่ของ
transportations
ของ
or
แบงค์
energy
เขาสามารถตั้ง end goal ได้ว่าแบบเขาจะ
where
ตั้ง
they
ฐาน
can
เกณฑ์
where
ที่
the
ว่า
banks
ที่มัน
can establish
สามารถวัด
their
ผลได้
end
แล้วก็
goals
work back กลับมาว่าเราอยู่จะช่วยทั้งตัวเอง
and
และลูกค้าเนี่ย transition
they
ได้ยังไง
could map out how they could help both themselves and clients transition.
ก็ Fair Finance Thailand ในฐานะที่เราก็
So Fair
คือ
Finance
ติดตามเรื่องนี้
Thailand,
นะคะ
as
ก็
we
เสนอ
are
ความเห็น
monitoring
ตอนที่เป็นร่าง
this
แล้วก็ขอบคุณแบงค์ชา
and
ติที่ก็
we
ปรับ
giving
รายส่วน
suggestions
ความ
to
เห็น
the
นะ
Bank of
ก็เห็นว่า
Thailand.
จริงๆแล้วเนี่ยประโยชน์อย่างหนึ่งที่เรามองอ่ะมัน
One
ไม่
of
ใช่แค่ว่า
the benefits
แบ
that
งค์
we
เอาไป
look
พยายาม
at
แมป
is not just
สิ่ง
like
ที่
for
ตัว
the
เอง
banks
นะ
to
คะ
map
คิดว่าประโยชน์อย่างห
what
นึ่ง
they
เลย
already
เนี่ย
have.
มัน
I
คือ
think
เป็น
one of the benefits
ตัว
is
อย่าง
that
ของเรียกว่ามาตรฐานขั้นสูง
it's let's say it's become a standards, a high
ก็
standards.
ความชัดเจนของตัวชี้วัดหลักเกณฑ์ต่างๆแล้วก็ยึดโยงมันมีที่มาที่ไปอย่างเช่นมาจาก EU Taxonomy
Because we have the criteria coming from EU taxonomy,
ได้
right?
มาก
This
เลยโดยเฉพาะ
help
เช่น
banks
ทุกธนา
a
คารก็
lot
เริ่มต้องบอกว่าโอเคในกระบวนการ
and the
กลั่นกรอง
banks
สินเชื่อเนี่ย
understands
มีการ
more
คำนึง
about in the process of
ก็คือ
giving
ความ
credits
เสี่ยง
they have to
ด้าน
think
สังคม
about
เราต้อง
ESG
ทีนี้มัน
the
ก็
risks
จะ
on
มียาก
environment
ว่าเราจะประเมินยังไง
society
ว่าอะไร ESG
and
ไหนทีนี้
government
พอมี taxonomy ในภาคพลังงานและขนส่งมันก็เป็นเกณฑ์ได้ประมาณ
So when we have
เช่น
taxonomies
โครงการพลัง
on
งานหมุ มุนเวียน
energy
เนี้ย
and
จริงๆ
transportations.
taxonomy เนี่ยจ
Now
ริงๆก็
we
คุณครูว่าก็แตะ
understand
ไปหน่อย
more.
นะคะก็คือว่าต่อให้ คือเขียนชัดเจนใน taxonomy ว่าเรื่อง climate mitigation หรือการ
So in taxonomies we
เป็นเป้าหมาย
write very clearly about climate mitigation,
ไม่สนใจ
right?
เป้าหมายด้านสิ่งแวดล้อมหลักๆอื่นๆได้ไม่ว่าจะ
It doesn't mean that they could ignore other issues besides climate mitigation, for example, like biodiversities. So there's criteria on environment why they have to focus on. So what I mean is that bank said that okay, they have a project. They could say that okay, that they have such like a few greenhouse gas emission, but this is by the do no significant harm.
เคารพหรือว่าไม่ละเมิดเกณฑ์ด้านสิ่งแวดล้อมที่เหลืออีก5ข้อยังไงหรือว่ามีความสุ่มเสี่ยง
But if they cannot explain like how would this project would not match with other criteria, the bank could consider whether they should invest in that project or not. So it's something for the banks to reference to, and they could refer to the credit committee whether the credit committee should fund this project or not because they did not pass the criteria of do no significant harm of the Bank of Thailand.
จะเอาไปใช้ออกบอนด์มากน้อยแค่ไหนเลยเราคิดว่าก็ไม่เป็นไรนี่ก็เป็นเรื่องของตลาดSo
for about if they're going to reference and use this for bonds market, I think it's fine. But I think it's more like good tools for giving credits on projects. Thank you very much. Kun Natee, do you have any last words? I understand this is final. So as add to what Kun Sarinee has said, if we have banks here, I think in real life this already happened, and the project is in amber or in red, and the criteria why they have to worked on.
อันนี้ครับเป็นปัญหาเพราะมันก็ต้องไปดูว่าคือใน taxonomy ก็มีเขียน
So in taxonomy it's said that okay you have to come up with like a 3-year plans how could you mitigate these risks. I think what so I mean, on one hand, it's an issue. The one who wants the loans are pretty alarmed. But on one hand, you can think that this is an opportunity for everyone to adjust. So the bank cannot just like, oh, this is red and we should not give loans because the BOT might reprimand them. But it's not like that. It's something that we should work on together and come up with a plan. If you have more green clients, your scope 3 will be easier in the future. I think this transition is very important, and do not be alarmed too much by the criteria of Bank of Thailand. I think discussion is still important as I come from industries. So we get a lot of aspects, we get a lot of perspectives. So this is probably the final question. I understand. In the morning is speakers from Creagy, right? You talk about the investment on the 3 phase. And the second phase is in 7 years to 2030. So what Creagy has studied, and this 8,000 million baht, where are the focuses? Is it carbon capture? Or do you have to focus on like new technology? So in this 8,000 million baht, what are the focuses?
จริง methodology ของการทำตัวเลข investment cost นะครับอันที่หนึ่งก็คือว่าทางทีมเนี่ยทางทีมวิจัยเนี่ยเอาแผนของ
the
ทาง
research team
กระ
used
ทรว
the
งนะครับ
plan
ซึ่ง
of
เขาจะ
the
มีเรียกว่าเป็น
ministry
NDC sectoral plan
when they
ก็คือ
have
แผ
NDC
นที่แต่
sectoral
ละภาคส่วน
plans
แต่ละสาขา
and these are
พลังงาน
plans
ขนส่ง
for like
การจัดการของเสียแล้วก็
energy
กระบวนการผลิตอุต
sectors,
สาหกรรม
transportation
เขาต้องทำเพื่
sector,
อบรรลุ
waste
เป้าการ
sector
ลด
have
การ
to
ใน
do
ปี
to
2030
achieve the
ใน
greenhouse
กระทรว
gas
งต่างๆเนี่ย
emission.
เขาก็จะมี
So
focal
in
point
each
นะครับอย่างเช่น
ministries, they would
ทาง
have
กระทรวงพ
focal
ลังงานก็
points.
จะเป็นทาง
For
สนพ
example,
นะครับ
Ministry
ทางกระทรวง
of
คม
Energy,
นาค
they
ม
would
ก็จะ
have
เป็นสนพ
ONEP
เรื่อง
and
เรื่องของเสียก็จะเป็นกรมควบคุมมลพิษนะครับแล้วก็ทางเรื่องกระบวนการผลิตก็จะเป็นกรมโรงงานครับทุกหน่วยเนี่ยเขาก็จะ
So
มีแผน
each
ทำว่าจะต้อง
ministry
ทำอะไรถึงจะ
would
มีเป้า
have
ปี
a plan
30 list ออก
of
มา
what
เป็น
they
100
have
มาตร
to
การ
do
เลย
to
อย่างเช่น
meet the
ทางข
goal
นส่ง
of
ก็บอกว่าต้องเปลี่ยนระบบ
2030.
รางรถเป็นราง
For example,
ทำ EV เพิ่ม
to
ขึ้น
the
อันเนี้ยทาง
transportation,
Creagy เนี่ยก็เอาแต่ละ
Ministry of
มาตรการ
Transport
มา
would
คำน
say
วณเป็น
that
ตั
they
วเล
have
ข
to
investment
change
cost
into
ทั้งหมด
rail
ประมาณ
system. They
100
have to
มาตร
use
การ
more
แล้ว
EV,
ก็แอดอัพออกมา
and we
ดังนั้น
use
คำถาม
that
ว่าตัวเลขนี้มาจากมาตร
into
การ
make
อะ
it
ไรแล้ว
into
มีอะไร
our
ในไพป์ไล
number.
น์นี้ก็คือจริงๆมาจากแผนของที่กระทรวงกำหนด
So
มา
when you ask
ซึ่ง
what
ใน
these
10 ปี
numbers
ที่จะถึง
come
นี้เนี่ยยัง
from,
ไม่ได้มี
it
ตัว
come
Renewable
from
เท่า
the
ไหร่
plan
ตัว
of the
CCS หรือ
ministry.
ว่า Carbon Capture
So with
Renewable เนี่ย
this,
จะอยู่ในเฟส
the
ถัด
first
ไป
phase,
จากปี
we
30
don't have a
ใน
lot
เฟ
of
สเนี้ยส่วนใหญ่จะเป็น
CCS or
การเป
carbon
ลี่ยนโครงสร้าง
capture.
พื้นฐาน
This
ว่า
phase
ของทาง
focuses
ก็เลย
on
เป็นก้อนเย
changing
อะที่เราเห็นว่าเป
infrastructure
ลี่ยนระบบ
and
เป็นราง
not
ส่วนใหญ่นะครับแต่การลงทุนก็จะ
doing the
ทำรางมากขึ้น
reducing.
ทำอะไรต่างๆมากขึ้น
Would be
ส่วนภาค
like
พลังงานเนี่ยก็
making
จะเป็น
more rails,
ตัว
for
เลขคือ
example.
โปรโมทเรื่อง
And
RE
for the
ที่คุณนา
energy
ทีได้เรียนไป
sector
แต่
is
ว่า
to
อัน
be
นี้ก็ต้องมาดูว่า
promotion
ทาง
on
ภาครัฐเอง
RE
เนี่ยเขา
as
จะ
คุณ
มี
Natee
การ
has said.
deregulate หรือปลดล็อกระบบพลังงาน
And
ยังไง
we
บ้าง
have
ตัวเลข
to
ส่วนใหญ่เนี่ยมาจากการลงทุนใน
we still
โซลาร์
have
กับ
to
วิน
see
ตามตัวเลข
how much the government
หลักๆก็
would
จะเป็นสองส่วนเลย
deregulate.
คือการเปลี่ยนโหมดที่ในภาคขนส่งเนี่ยเขาจะบอกว่ามี3
So the
โมเดล
focus
คือ
would be on
avoid
changing
shift
the
แล้วก็
modes
reduce นะครับก็คือเปลี่ยนโหมดแล้วก็ชิฟไปสู่
and then
อะไร
shift
ต่างๆอะไรเงี้ย
to
ประมาณนั้นแล้วก็ส่วนของ
different
พลังงานก็จะมี RE กับ
modes.
EE ครับยังไม่ได้มี Renewable
And
เท่านั้น
then for the energy
อัน
is
นี้ก็
RE and
เดี๋ยว
EE.
ทางทีมเนี่ยจริงๆตัว PowerPoint แล้วก็
So the
ผลการศึกษา
PowerPoint
เดี๋ยวจะมี
and
แช
the
ร์เพิ่มเติมได้
final
ถ้าสนใจ
report
ครับ
is going to
แต่
be
ว่าปัจจุบันต้อง
shared.
เรียนว่า
If you're
ทาง
interested,
ประเทศ
we
ไทย
can
เรากำลังอัปเดต
distribute it
ตัว
to you.
NDC sectoral plan แผนฉบับ
So
ใหม่
right now,
ซึ่งกำลังจะคลอ
Thailand
ดอ
is
อกมาปลายปี
updating
ก็
NDC
ถ้ามีตัว
sectoral
เลขตัว
plan,
แผนออกมาก็ต้องมาทำ
which
ตัวเล
is
ขตัวใหม่
going to
เป็นแผน
launch
เก่าๆแล้วเรา
late
ตัวเลข
this
เอา
year,
ครับ
and we have to redo the calculation
โอเคครับ
according to that.
งั้นเชิญทางธนาคาร
จะเติมนิดหนึ่งที่พี่นาทีบอกอะค่ะที่เป็น
As
ตก
คุณ
เขียวเหลือง
Natee
แดง
has
ใช่ไหมคะ
said,
คือจริงๆแบงก์ชาติยังไม่ได้มีนโยบาย
the
ที่แบบจะห้ามปล่อยอะไรเลยนะคะเหมือนกับว่าเราก็อยาก
I
ให้คุณ
want
ได้ลอง
to
ประเมินก่อนว่า
assure
ตัว
that
เขียวเหลืองเหมือนกับ
BOT,
ว่า
the
พอตัว
Bank
เอง
of
เนี่ยถ้า
Thailand,
เขียวเราก็
doesn't have
อาจ
any
จะโอเคมันต้องมี
regulations
opportunity แบบหนึง
on
มี
the
risk แบบหนึ่ง
projects that
เห
are
ลือง
in
กับแดง
green,
ก็มี
amber,
risk กับ
or
opportunity
red
อีกแบบหนึ่งเหมือน
yet,
กันที
because
เนี้ยค่ะ
each
พอเรารู้
project
ว่า
in
พอร์ต
green,
เป็นยังไง
amber,
แล้
and
วอะ
red
เราถึงจะจัด
have
การกับ
different
risk
risks
ที่เกิดขึ้น
and
ได้
opportunities.
มันไม่ใช่การ
The
ห้ามปล่อยแค่ดูว่า
BOT does
อ
not
นาคตเนี่ย
forbid
เรา
or
จะ
does not
วันไหนเราแค่ไหนเราจะอ่อนไหวมันจะมีความเสี่ยง
does not
เกิดขึ้นถ้าสมมติ
regulate
สามารถเอาไปถึง
any
stress test scenario อะไรแบบนี้ได้ค่ะมันจะมองเห็น
any
ตัว
things
เลขที่
on
จับ
these
ต้องได้
projects
มากขึ้นแล้ว
yet.
ก็จะได้รู้ว่า
We
จะ
just want
จะ
you
เริ่ม
to
shift
understand
พอร์ต
your
เริ่มวางแผนยังไง
portfolio
เพราะ
now
ว่า
and how you
สุด
could
ท้ายแล้วมัน
shift
เป็นการบ
your
ริหารความเสี่ยงมันมีทั้งโอกาส
portfolio
และมีทั้งความ
because
เสี่ยง
it's
ก็
about
จะได้
risk
คำนึงถึงอย่าง
management.
รอบด้านค่ะ
โอเคครับงั้นอาจจะ
So
ขอให้
thank
วิท
you
ยากร
very
รอบสุด
much.
ท้ายนะครับ
So
เหมือนกับแช
everyone,
ร์
if
สรุป
all
ว่า
of you could
วัน
have
นี้
your
เรา
final
มาอยู่
words.
ด้วยกันนะครับแล้วก็จะมีอะไรแบบเหมือนฝากไว้เพราะวันนี้เข้าใจว่าภาคส่วนธนาคารมาฟังเยอะนิดนึงอาจจะมี
Because I understand we are joined by a lot of banks today.
ต่างๆพี่นาทีก่อนกันนะครับ1 นาทีคนละ1 นาที
So
นะครับ
1 minute each.
สรุป
จริงๆไม่มีแล้วครับ
I
หมดแล้วครับ
I actually
ปล่อย
have
หมด
no
แล้ว
words.
หนู
I
มันจะ
address
4 โมงครึ่ง
everything.
แล้ว
This is almost 4:30
ไม่
already.
มีอะไรก็อย่างที่ฝากไว้สุดท้ายนะค
Just
รับ
as I
เป็นช่วงเปลี่ยน
said,
ผ่านนะครับ
it's a
เป็นช่วงปรับตัวนะครับ
transitional
ภาคธุรกิจ
period.
ภาคอุตสาหกรรมเราก็ต้องปรับ
So
ตัว
the
ภาค
industry
ชุมชนต้องปรับ
sector
ตัว
has to
รัฐบาล
adapt
ต้องปรับ
as well,
ตัว
and the
นะครับ
government has to
เพราะว่าถ้าเรา
adapt
ไม่
as
ต่างคน
well.
ต่างไม่ปรับตัวมันไปไหนไม่ได้
Because if we you do not adapt, we cannot move anywhere. That's it.
ก็ฝากสั้นๆเหมือนกันนะคะในฐานะที่เคยทำงานธนาคาร
So as I worked in bank before, I want banks to be a helper in driving these transitions and the just energy transitions. And I know there are a lot of skilled personnel in banks. I think they could help. And for individual levels, if you're interested in just energy transitions, you could begin very easily by signing documents on like where
เสนอกับ
the
ตัวแทนพรรคการเมืองไปแล้วก่อนที่จะรู้
project
จะเห็น
called
มาตรา
ค่าไฟต้อง fair
ก็คงมี
means
กระบวนการ
that
ต่างๆ
the
ต่อไป
electricity
ร่วมลง
fee
ชื่อกัน
must be fair. You can sign the petition.
ถ้าสำหรับทางของแบงก์ชาติอาจจะ
As
มองว่า
for
จ
the
ริงๆอะค่ะเรื่อง
Bank of
เรื่องโลกร้อนเนี่ย
Thailand,
มันทำคนเดียว
we
ไม่
think
ได้
that
ค่ะ
the global
แบงก์ชาติหรือ
warming
ภาคการเมืองคนเดียวก็
cannot
ทำไม่ได้
be
จะต้อง
done
มี
by just
แผ
one
นการ
sector.
ดำเนินงานที่ชัดเจนจากภาครัฐ
It has to be
NDC ที่กำลัง
planned
จะอ
from
อก
the
มาอีกที
government,
นะคะ
just like the
แล้วก็
NDC that's
นอก
going
จาก
to
ภาครัฐ
release
ภาค
at the
ธนา
end
คาร
of
แล้ว
this
ภาคธุร
year.
กิจเองก็สามาร
And
ถ
from
ช่วย
the
แบงก์
banks
ได้
and
ในการ
industry,
ที่ให้
everyone
ข้อ
could
มูล
chip in
อาจจะเป็น
to
การปล่อย
give
การหรือว่าการ
data
ที่สามารถลองประเมิน
or
ธุร
to
กิจตัว
help
เองแล้วก็
evaluate your own business and give back data to the
น่า
bank
เชื่อถือแล้วก็มีคุณภาพค่ะจะช่วยให้
because
แบงก์
you know
สามารถ
credible data
เหมือนร่วมมือ
could
กัน
help
ไม่ใช่
the
แค่แบง
Bank
ก์คน
of
เดียว
Thailand
แบงก์
and
จับมือกับธุรกิจ
everyone
แล้วก็
else
สามารถช่วยกันวางแผนเพื่อที่จะ
to
เปลี่ยนแปลง
plan
ได้
for
มันเป็น
smooth
ความร่วมมือทั้ง
transition.
ecosystem ทั้งข้อมูลของทุกคน
Everyone's
ทุกคนเหมือนจริงๆแล้วเรื่องโลกร้อนมันไม่ใช่
data
เป็น
would
เรื่อง
help
ของ
contribute because
การ
you
อ
know
อกมาพูด
global
นะคะ
warming
มันคือ
it's
การ
just
ทำ
not
ต้องลงไปที่
talking
action
about
ซึ่ง
it
ทุกคน
it
สามารถ
has
มี
to
ส่วน
go
ร่วม
down
ได้
to action where everyone could
ครั
help.
บงั้นก็
Thank
มา
you
ถึง
very
จุด
much.
สุดท้ายของเรานะครับ
So
เพราะว่าผมก็ส่วนตัวก็หวังว่างานสัมมนาเสว
hopefully
นาในวันนี้นะครับจริงๆ
I
เหมือนกับ
hope
มาช่วย
that
จุด
the
ประกายเนอะ
event
เพราะว่า
today
แต่ละคนก็
would
จะมี
inspire
ความรู้พื้นฐานแตกต่างกัน
people
แล้วก็มาจุดให้เห็น
who
ว่า
have
จริงๆ
different
เรื่องของ
knowledge and
climate
different
change เนี่ยมันมีมิติต่าง
perspective
ๆ
here
มากมายนะค
and
รับและจริงๆขอบคุณทุกภาค
understand
ส่วน
more
นะครับแล้วก็
insights
เป็นจุด
about
เริ่มต้นแล้ว
climate
ที่ทำให้พวกเรา
finance
เนี่ยจะมีก้าวแรก
and this
ร่วมกัน
could
ที่ถูกต้องนะครับ
initiate
โมเดล
the correct
มีการ
first
เดิน
step
ที่คิด
for
ล่วงห
all
น้า
of
ก่อน
us
นะครับไม่ใช่
to
ทำไป
have
แล้ว
the
ก็
model
มองไม่ครบด้านนะครับแล้วก็หลัง
and
จากนั้น
to
เนี่ย
look
taxonomy
to
เนี่ย
to
ที่
look
เรามาคุ
at
ยกันก็จะเป็น
this
จุดต่อ
issue
ร่วมกัน
holistically
วันนี้ก็
and
ผมส่วนตัว
taxonomy
ขออนุ
could
ญาตขอบ
help
คุณ
it.
วิทยากรทุกท่านอีกครั้งนะครับคุณนาทีนะครับ
So thank you very much คุณ
คุณ
Natee
สรุณี
from
จาก Fair Finance นะครับแล้วก็ทางคุณ
FTI
จาก
คุณ Sarinee from
ทาง
Fair
ขอบคุณให้ทุก
Finance
ท่านอีกครั้งนะครับ
and
ขอบคุณมากๆครับแล้วก็ขอบคุณทุกท่านที่รับชมทางที่นี่แล้วก็
คุณ
ทางบ้าน
Thanida
ก่อน
from
นะครับ
Bank
ก็
of
ขออภัย
Thailand.
ที่
Thank
เกิน
you
เวลา
the
จริงๆ
audience
นะครับ
and
ผมอยาก
thank
รู้
you
เองก็ถาม
the
เยอะนิดนึง
people and
ข
the
อบคุณทุก
floor
ท่านเลยครับ
here.
ครับสวัสดี
Thank
ค
you
รับ
very much.
ฮัลโหลครับเดี๋ยวรบกวนทุกท่านถ้าใครมีความคิดเห็นเพิ่มเติมนะครับหรือว่าใครที่คิดว่ามีประเด็นที่อยากสอบถามหรือว่าอยากให้มีการศึกษาเพิ่มเติมนะครับก็อาจจะรบกวนกรอกใน feedback form นะครับที่ขึ้น QR code ด้านบนนะครับทั้งนี้ทั้งนั้นครับเดี๋ยวจะมีส่งไปทางอีเมลของทุกท่านอีกรอบนะครับแต่ยังไงรบกวนทุกท่านสามารถกรอกได้เลยนะครับขอบคุณครับสำหรับบัตรจอดรถนะครับด้านหน้างานตรงบริเวณจุดลงทะเบียนนะครับจะมีที่สแตมป์นะครับทุกท่านก็สามารถใช้ได้เลยนะครับ